What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 675. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how are you?
I'm all right. It's been a crazy week, to say the least of it. We'll get into some of that, but I do want to say that I also just got over norovirus. So
sounded awful.
If you haven't had it, then you are in for a treat. And if you have had it, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. I'm glad you're feeling better, though. And we're here to do the Brothers War Set Review Rare and Mythic Rare show, which is going to be a really interesting one. There's a bunch of cool kind of twists on the whole rare thing in the show. We're going to go over every single one of the rares and mythics in the Brothers War to find out which ones are the really great bombs or which ones maybe you would want to avoid. Before we do, let's talk sponsors. So there's a couple of things to cover here. First up, our sponsor, TCG Player /Channel Fireball. And CFB and TCG Player have teamed up to create a subscription that every Magic player needs. This is exclusive CFB Pro content. That's right. You get access to CFB Pro, and you also get free shipping and tracking on direct by TCG Player orders. And you even get bonus bucks and some awesome promos from TCGplayer.com for $6.99 a month. There's a link in the show notes for that. And of course, TCG Player, they got the marketplace, right? That's the place to go to buy Magic cards. And the reason that it's so great, this is why CFB took this model on as well before they combined, was that you get to comparison shop. And it's not just comparison shop cards, you're comparison shopping shops, like actual places that, are going to be sending you the cards. And that gives you access to the fastest shipping times for where you live, for the card that you want exactly. And I don't just mean like the card, I mean like the condition of the card or the, which set it's from, if it's been reprinted or something like that. You can get exactly what you want over at TCG Player. They're the biggest marketplace for collectible card games and such on the internet. And they've been around for a long time, and we certainly highly recommend them. You can find a link, by the way, in the show notes to our TCG Player link. And what that does is it sends you over as like an affiliate. It lets them know that we're the ones that sent you over, and it helps support the show. And we do appreciate it. Now, when it comes to our other sponsors, well, we don't have any currently. So we wanted to talk about this a little bit up front with the show before we get into the card. So we're going to take a few minutes here to talk about it, and then we're going to move on to the set review. But as you may have heard, FTX, which was the company that sponsored the podcast for like the past year, has filed for bankruptcy, and it looks like it's going to be facing ongoing financial and even possibly legal issues going forward. Basically, they completely collapsed over the past week or so. And so there's some stuff that we wanted to talk to you about as our listener. First off, we've severed all ties with FTX, and we're no longer sponsored by them or affiliated with them in any way. But we also wanted to talk about kind of what happened there. And basically, we approached the partnership in good faith. We were not aware of any of the issues that were going on behind the scenes there. And frankly, we were blindsided by the news. Really totally shocked to see what had happened. When we were considering going with them, we vetted them the best that we could. And, part of that, of course, was the big names associated with them. Tom Brady, Stephen Curry, Miami Heat, even some of the big traditional investment firms, that went with them. These are, firms that you're aware of if you follow any of this investment stuff. And it's like, they're all on board. So, that gave us the feeling that if those things we're going to associate with them, that maybe it would be okay for us to as well. And beyond that, we just believed what they told us about regulation compliance within their company, and also with their ethical stuff. We said, well, what about the environment? We said, well, what about, making the world a better place, that type of stuff. And they showed us their sites and their plans and all of the stuff that they were doing on behalf of that. But the more news that comes out, it's becoming more and more clear that they were not being truthful with us at all. And as a result of all of this, our judgment was that it was okay to proceed with them as a partner. And it's clear now that that was an error in judgment. We take the responsibility of who we partner with seriously. And we recognize the effect that the collapse of FTX has had, and we're devastated about it. I will say, that going forward, we're going to continue to learn as we move forward and do our best to make good decisions when it comes to partners for the podcast. And hopefully, we can rebuild some of that trust if some was lost between you and I, or you and the show. Luis, you had some stuff you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, to echo, I echo a lot of what you said, but I do want to add kind of that, we believed in them. And, this is personally and professionally a pretty big setback. And I would like to apologize for where we ended up, because I do understand kind of how much this could cause it, or this causes a loss of trust. And I think that, and I understand that kind of where we vouched for FTX, and we used the information we had at the time. And, part of that was, like you said, other entities vouching for them, and the kind of personal connections I had through some, like from a kind of like 2 degrees separated to the folks there. And we believed in them. I worked for FTX. They purchased the game that I worked for. We've both invested in them. So we're really sorry that we ended up here, and we want to kind of move forward, but we do want to accept kind of responsibility. We made an error in partnering with them, and we did that based on the information we had at the time. And I guess all we can do going forward is continue to try to do our best.
Let's move on. Grading scale overview. We are going to be talking about all of the cards, the rares and mythics in the set, and that means that giving them some context can be really important, Luis.
Yeah, let's take a look at the grades. So we use an A through F scale with 2 subgrades, and the A's are bombs, game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, the best cards in the set, and hyper efficient spells. We're talking cards like Shieldred and Archangel of Wrath. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. Headliners for a set, go-to cards and reasons to be in a color, clan, or guild. Cards like Nishoba Brawler and Lightning Strike. C's are playables. These are the Pawns of Limited. And cards like Maria's Outrider, Floriferous Vinewall, and Essence Scatter. And D's are the cards you're pretty unhappy if you have to run them. They're sometimes playable, only when you're desperate. Cards like Barkweave Crusher or Banalish Faithbonder. F's are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. Cards that cost 10 mana. Well, actually, in this set, some cards that cost 10 mana are playable, but we'll get to that. Cards like Chaotic Transformation, Urza Assembles the Titans, that all has to do with Planeswalkers, for example. Our subgrades are sideboard cards that rarely, if ever, make the main deck. Cards like Broken Wings or Smash to Dust that can be very good out of the sideboard. You just wouldn't main deck them. Again, a little different in this sort of deck. And lastly, we've got build-arounds. Cards that typically don't work on their own, but you can make them work if you have the right cards. Cards like Vesuvian Duplimancy and Tolarian Terror.
Okay, and we're going to start things off with blue, and we'll go through the individual colors, and then we'll do the gold and artifacts. And then this particular set also has a subset of cards, retro artifacts that are reprints ranging from uncommon to mythic rare that are apparently appearing in 1 per pack. Is that right, Luis, how you understand it?
Yeah, I think there's a retro artifact slot, but it does depend on rarity. So you're going to see Wormcoil Engine less frequently than you'll see Chromatic Star. Man,
Wormcoil Engine's in this set? All right. So first blue card out of the gate is Drafna, Founder of Latnam. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 legendary human artificer advisor at rare. And it has 2 different activated abilities. One of them is 1 and a blue, return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. And then you can pay 3 and tap it to copy target artifact spell you control. And usually what the wording on that means is it's an artifact that's on the stack, right?
Right. So for Drafna, the kind of plan here is you play this, and then when you're on like 5 or 6 mana, you play an artifact, you have 3 left over, you copy it, you get 2 of that artifacts. And it has the ability to return an artifact, so you can, like if you draw this late, you can return one of your artifacts to then play and copy it and just keep doing that. Drafna is really good once you have a lot of mana. And even early in the game, it's a 2-mana 2/1. You can block with it on turn 3 if you need to. Plus, it can like save your artifact creatures from removal, or you can block and bounce them. A lot going on here, and I think all of it is good. Like, it gives you a really good mana sink. When you have like Drafna and 7 mana in play, you're probably going to win the game if they don't kill Drafna.
Right.
And then the fact that it's a 2-mana 2/1 means there's no real fail case for it. So I would give Drafna a B+. I just don't think there's anything wrong with the card.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, you know, the subtext here are the Power Stones, you know, paying for the 3 mana. If you normally were to try to add a full 3 mana to any artifact just to try to get a copy, it would usually be too much. But here we assume that we'll be able to pay that a decent amount of the time. So B+ for Drafna. Next is Hurkyle, who's actually Drafna's wife, according to the flavor text here. Hurkyle, Master Wizard. And Hurkyle is 1 blue for a 2/4 legendary human wizard advisor. Also at Rare. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
This gets an F based on the text box alone.
Can I have English?
Look,
so if I cast an instant, I can get an instant?
Yes, is for every non-creature spell you've cast, you get to pick one of those from the top 5 at the end of your turn.
Okay.
But it's an incomprehensible text box. Look, the card's fine. It's a 3-mana 2/4. And when you cast non-creature spells, you get to take a look and maybe try to peel one off the top. So it's like a B, but this text boxes like this are pretty, I think they just detract from the fun in Magic.
They are a big turnoff for sure. Yeah, I like B+ for Hurkyle, especially if you manage to build around it a little bit. Next is Skystrike Officer. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 flyer. It's a human soldier, and it's rare. And it says, whenever Skystrike Officer attacks, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. And then it says, tap 3 untapped soldiers you control, draw a card. Wow, that has a heck of a lot going on. It is weird to see the soldier specific stuff in blue still, but that is absolutely a sub theme in this, or a theme in this set. And this card looks fantastic. I really love the 3 toughness on it too, because it makes it, you know, more likely you'll be able to turn this thing sideways a couple of times.
Oh yeah, this card's amazing. I would give it an A- actually. This is just a straight up bomb. When your opponent plays this on turn 3, if you can't kill it, you're going to lose the game. That's basically it.
And then there's also scenarios, right, where like if you already have 3 soldiers out, you play this and you can just draw a card immediately.
Well, even better, if you have 2 soldiers out, you can play it and draw a card because it's a soldier. So yes.
Wow. Okay, so if you go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop all soldiers into this, you're in business. A- for Skystrike Officer. Urza's Command. This better be good. 2 blue for an instant at Rare. Choose 2. Creatures you don't control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Okay. And you get to choose 2 of these. Create a tapped Power Stone token. Create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And scry 1, then draw a card. Wow. That card's sweet.
Yeah, so when I look at the commands, they're all great, by the way. There's a bunch of these in the set. When I look at the commands, I think where you can evaluate them from is what's the 2 most common modes and how good is that? And for this one, it's going to be make a construct, draw a card most likely, or make a Power Stone, make a construct, I think are the most common modes. Those are both great. I would play a card that was just make a construct, draw a card. And this is even scry 1, draw a card.
Right.
And so then you add a couple other modes and you get to mix and match. I would give Urza's Command an A-. It's not quite a full bomb, but it's very close.
And the interesting thing is the first mode, creatures you don't control get -2/-0, will be the one you use the least often, but it's so high leverage when it's actually good, right? That like you get to kind of go off. Now, it is worth noting that both of the artifacts are tapped. So like you can't make a blocker and then shrink the thing down. But whatever, the card's awesome. Teferi Temporal Pilgrim is next. This is 3 blue for a 4 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Teferi Mythic. Teferi has this static ability. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi. You can pay 0 to draw a card. So that reads as +1 draw a card. You can -2 to create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance somehow. And whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And you can -12. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So let's just ignore the -12. we're kind of back to our roots here, Luis. Like this is, +1 draw card, -2 protect me, right? This is a classic Planeswalker template, and these things are always super bombs.
Yeah, they're fairly good. I mean, this doesn't protect on flyers. That's one of the things you look at. Can you make something that stops a flyer? This can't. But what this does have is if you draw cards with any other way, it also puts loyalty counters on Teferi. So it naturally is ticking up 1 per turn on your draw step. And then if you pay 0, draw a card, it gets another +1, and then you cast a draw 2 and it gets 2 more loyalty. Like, I don't even think you can disregard the -12 under those circumstances. You could have a deck that gets 3-4 loyalty a turn on Teferi, every couple turns.
Yeah, I think my thinking was just that you would have won before. Maybe. But you're right. You are right. There are scenarios where it gets crazy and you can definitely up the loyalty. Okay.
And of course, just if they don't have a flyer, they don't have a way to attack it, playing it -2ing, next turn it goes up to 3, -2 again, then cast your card draw spell and have 2 4/4s in play in a 3/3 Teferi. If you cast the common draw 2 discard one.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, so I would give Teferi an A. Like, if they can't deal with it immediately, they're going to lose, and it very quickly spirals out of control.
So the only question I do have, I also, by the way, agree with A, but should we adjust for the removal hitting, much of the removal hitting Planeswalkers now? Do we need to, or is that just the dice to removal argument that it doesn't really hold up?
I think it's kind of baked in, especially since, let's say the removal couldn't hit Planeswalkers. A lot of the time you're going to play Teferi minus it, and then if they kill that and attack Teferi, it's also in tough shape. So I don't think that necessarily changes things.
It's what we're really saying is it's effectively impossible not to get a 2-for-1 with Teferi, and if that's the case, it's an A. And then if left unchecked for 2 turns, the game's over. The Temporal Anchor is next. It's 3 blue for a legendary artifact at Rare. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. That is powerful, but not worth 6 mana. Whenever you choose to put 1 or more cards on the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor.
So this is basically a fancy way of saying draw 3 cards a turn.
Right. You just put them all on the bottom. Yeah.
The kind of upsides to them are, A, this doesn't deck you. If you get down to 5 cards in your deck, you can just stop using this. You can just scry to the top, and then you're not getting any extra cards out of your deck. And then B, if it's a counter spell or a card you don't want to play right away, you just cry it to the top, so it's not exiled because you're forced to play it right away.
Because it's during your turn.
So, I mean, this is basically 3 blue, draw an extra 2 cards a turn, but you can dial it back if you need to. So it's that with upside. That's really good. I mean, I think Temporal Anchor is quite strong. You can cast it with Power Stone since it's an artifact. It is, kind of expensive and costs triple blue. I would give it a B+. There's some decks that cannot beat this card. You're going to play it on turn 5 or 6 with a Power Stone, or maybe turn 7. And if they can't beat you, you're just going to run them over in card advantage. You play against red-white aggro, you probably don't want to draw this card ever. So it's an expensive finisher. It's
a strangely situational card, and it does nothing. There's a big red flag. You spend all this mana and you just say go, nothing happens. Then on your turn, you can start benefiting from it. But as you mentioned, in mid-range matchups or control matchups, it's going to spiral out of control very quickly. I would caution, though, that if you do run a card like the Temporal Anchor, you have to be really careful that basically all the other cards that you run affect the board directly. You don't have a lot of room for a bunch of divination type effects where you're using that to draw into Temporal Anchor. You're just not doing enough, and you will get ran over even by an average mid-range deck. So keep that in mind. Hurkyl's Final Meditation, 4 blue for an instant at Rare. As long as it's not your turn, this spell costs 3 more to cast. So we get up to 10 mana. Okay. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. End the turn. End the turn means that, well, I guess it says here, exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The players whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size, damage wears off, and this turn until end of turn effects end. So it really does just end the turn straight up.
This card, I think, is just completely unplayable. This is a candidate for an F for me, because for it to be good, you want to cast it on their turn, and then it costs 10 mana, and you can't even play it with Power Stones. So, because you cast it on your turn, everything gets bounced, and now it's their turn, and they get to recast their stuff, they get the first crack at it.
Right.
So it's an F. It costs too much mana.
Okay. F for Hurkyl's Final Meditation. Last blue card is called One with the Multiverse. It costs 8 mana. Wow. 6 blue for an enchantment at Mythic Rare. It says, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. I like where this is going. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So it's Future Sight on Turbo.
Yeah, it's basically Future Sight, but it also lets you play one for free. I actually quite like this card because, look, it's expensive. It's kind of like the Temporal Anchor in that it costs 1 million mana, but it has the upside of you get to play whatever the best card is in your hand or on the top of your deck for free, like right away. So it does affect the board right away. That said, it's a build around because it costs 8 mana and can't even be paid for with Power Stones. So I would say this is like a build around B, where if you're heavy in ramp, this card can actually win some games. My guess is you're not going to pull it off very often.
It's just funny seeing you try to dance around the fact that you desperately want to play this card and build towards it and try to find some way to be like, yes, it's 8 mana, but but it's true though, right? That first spell, if it's a removal spell or something that affects the board, you're kind of back in business. I mean, this is the type of card that wins the game in short order. I mean, it's a little tough that it's sitting right next to it's the third such effect, right? Like this Temporal Anchor and even to an extent Teferi are all very similar in that they just turbo you with cards but don't, do that much. Obviously Teferi is the best out of this bunch by a long shot, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to end up playing this card all that often, but there's some matchups and some decks where you actually would be happy with this card.
A boy can dream. Build around B for One with the Multiverse. That moves us to black. First card is Ashnod Flesh Mechanist. This is black for a 1/1 legendary human artificer at Rare with Death Touch. And I have to say, vanilla test wise, French vanilla test, that already is okay. There's many formats where this is a perfectly playable card, but there's more. Whenever Ashnod Flesh Mechanist attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a tapped Power Stone token, and you can pay 5 mana and exile a creature card from your graveyard to create a 3/3 tapped colorless zombie artifact creature token. Beautiful.
Yeah, this card's great. It's a cheap card that affects the board. It gives you a good sack outlet, and then it also gives you an expensive activated ability to use that mana, like the Power Stone mana, while also just doing something in the late game. So all the abilities synergize pretty nicely with each other.
Yeah, the only downside is that it must attack to get this train rolling, and that really does give a lot of agency to your opponent about okay, I'll try this off for a token or for something small, but whatever. I don't know. I like it. I like cards like this. Plus the baseline of just having a 1 mana card that actually matters is good. I'd give Ashnod a B.
Yeah, I like B for Ashnod.
Diabolic Intent. Is this a reprint? Somebody said it was a reprint. I did not know
It's a reprint from...
what's it from?
Plane Shift.
Oh, okay. That's the set that came out right before I started playing Magic, so that makes sense. Diabolic Intent is 1 and a black for a sorcery at Rare. It says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and you get to search your library for a card, put that card in your hand, and then shuffle. So
the problem we usually have with tutors is, let's say the baseline of, 2 black, Diabolic Tutor, 2 black, search your library for a card. In Limited, we just don't think that card's very good, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is cheaper, but you have to sack a creature, which doesn't really help because it's still, you're paying too high a cost. The delta between an average card in your deck and the best card in your deck in Limited is generally not that big. Whatever your average card is like a C. The best card in your deck is sometimes an A, but often is going to be close to a B to A, and certainly wouldn't be an A if you had to pay 2 mana on top of it and sack a creature. So I'm looking at Diabolic Intent and thinking I'm probably never going to play this card.
I'm assuming that too.
Yeah, maybe a really heavy sacrifice deck or something.
Yeah, if there's a deck that makes sackable creatures routinely, then I actually am interested in this. Compare it to something like Village Rites or something, right? Where you're or what's the one that can do artifacts, so whatever, where you're sacrificing a creature to draw
Deadly
2 cards.
Dispute.
Yeah, that type of effect, right? Where you're sacrificing something on the board to get some advantage. And this one doesn't give you card advantage, but boy, getting your very best card for that moment does matter. That is a powerful effect. You know, if it didn't have the sacrifice part, you'd be really interested in a card like this. So the question is, how big of a deal is sacrificing a creature? And the answer is it's a big deal unless it's not. So if your deck is built to have things to sacrifice like that, then I would actually run a Diabolic Intent. Outside of that, I wouldn't. It's a major, major cost if you just like pay 4 mana for a creature and then just send it away to Diabolic Intent. It's also worth noting that this is a sorcery, so there's no shenanigans with like saving or block sacking or anything like that. I would give it a D. I assume that you just won't play it very often.
I think it's probably closer to an F than a D, but yeah, it's not a card you're going to play.
Maybe a build around D. I mean,
yeah, that's
I don't know.
It's glowing review.
Not looking great for Diabolic Intent. What does Misery's Shadow do?
On the other hand, a Misery's Shadow is 1 and a black for a 2/2 shade at rare. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile instead, and you can pay 1 generic mana, not colorless. That whole theme made it. You actually have to say generic, but anyway, it's 1 mana of any kind to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. This card's amazing. I mean, wow. If you attack with this on turn 3, they can never block, and then you attack with this on turn 7, they probably still can't block. It's as big as the number of lands you control. Uses Power Stone mana. I mean, this is just an A. It's good at every point in the game, and even has a static ability that can mess up some decks. Like it messes up Unearth, stops the black-green deck from kind of working. It's just in play. It's got this massive threat of activation, and because it's so perfectly efficient, where 1 mana is +1/+1, you don't have to like over pump it. Where if it's like 3 mana to give +3/+3, and they block with the 2/2, you kind of spend extra mana.
Wow, I'm surprised that they went so old school on the shade here. Like this reminds me of old, where they're just like, this is what they do. Yeah. Next is Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, which is 1 black for a 3/3 legendary Phyrexian Praetor, and it is Mythic Rare. So we have a 3 mana 3/3 Mythic. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. So the controller of the creature, right? If they do, they draw a card. So this wording is for commander, right?
Yeah, it basically means every time you hit them with a creature, you can pay a life to draw a card.
Okay.
And it's not 1 or more. It's like literally every creature. If you hit them with 3 creatures. Yeah, like how some cards these days are worded so they only trigger once? This one just isn't.
Question then on rule. So if three hit, when do I decide if I'm paying?
They all trigger.
So they all trigger.
And then you pay 1, draw, pay 1, draw, pay 1, draw. Or not, depending on, like, let's say you wanted to hit a land, but you're at like 6 life.
Yeah.
You could draw it if you hit a land, not draw the other 2.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Cool. And then it also has an activated ability of 4 black, and discard X cards. Exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play land cards and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost.
Yeah, the activated ability is no joke. So basically you have to pay 7, which is a lot, but for every card you discard, you get a card back. I mean, it doesn't quite work out that way because if you exile 3 lands, you can only play 1 of them. But let's say you discard 2 cards, you're probably gonna hit a land and a spell or something in some combination, and you get to play them both. So whatever excess cards you have at 7 mana, you get to turn into random cards from their deck, which is generally a good deal.
It is, especially if that number gets up into the 4 or 5 range where you just ditch your hand and then you can just, cast 3 spells and get a land from them or whatever. This card's obviously amazing, right? It's also well statted at 3/3 for 3. I'm honestly surprised they didn't give it extra like menace or, they push these cards so hard now. But 3/3 for 3 actually has a decent chance, especially if you're on the play, of attacking and connecting straight away.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good if you can play this with like a flyer or an unblockable creature to start with. It's really just a good card. Like there's no.
I think I'd rather lose and pay the life and draw the card than just refuse to draw the card at any juncture.
Yeah, you're not that likely to want to do that, but I do think that the fact that it's optional does mean that you don't get into a spot where you can't attack them.
Yeah, Gix looks like an A to me.
Yeah, I would say Gix is an A just because it's got the combination of really powerful late game, potentially really good early game or mid game. Like anytime you have a board where something's going to get through, Gix has already like completely earned its cost. And there's some games that like if you go 2-drop and then they play a 2-drop that can't block it for some reason or don't have one, and you play Gix on 3, you've won the game right there.
Exactly.
Really hard for them to come back at that point.
Right. And then always remember, too, that you can wait to cast. You don't have to put it down on the table. You can build out a board, wait till they tap out, and then go Gix attack you with everything when they only have trades or marginal blocks. And you're going to get 2 creatures through, draw those cards. They're going to have to make trades they don't want. And they still have to untap and answer Gix, but you've just reloaded your hand. That's a perfectly fine play pattern, too. Next card is called Fateful Handoff. It's 3 and a black for a sorcery at rare. It says draw cards equal to the mana value of target artifact or creature you control. An opponent gains control of that permanent.
I think this card's completely unplayable. So let's say you sacked a creature or artifact to draw that many cards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I mean, I could see wanting to sack a 3 or a 4-drop, draw 3 or 4 cards, and you're giving up a decent amount of board presence, right? Like if you sack a 4-drop, you kind of spend 8 mana overall.
Yeah.
But giving it to your opponent is so much worse than that. Unless you're giving them something that's like bad, which that's not really what's going to happen. I think you're putting yourself in a terrible position.
Yeah, and it's such a huge tempo loss for you. I mean, wow. So you give them your creature, you have all these cards in your hand, and then you're just like, go ahead, like, hopefully I survive. That seems way too risky. I'm with you. I do not like Fateful Handoff. That seems like way too big of a cost. There's probably some cool combo, that you can pull off with it. But I think for, game in, game out, it's probably just an F, right? I think it's an awful.
F. I think playing this card would generally be a pretty big mistake.
Because, if you did a 4-drop, you're only up 2 cards, right? Or I guess you're up 3 cards. 2 cards? Well, I don't know. Because we usually consider it a 2-for-1 if you mind control an opponent's creature, and this is a reverse of that.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, so I think you're only up a couple of cards anyway. Gixian Puppeteer is next. It's 3 and a black for a 4/3 Phyrexian Warlock. This one's rare. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. When Gixian Puppeteer dies, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Good God.
I mean, this is a little mini Shieldred, right?
It's mini Shieldred, yeah.
But more, I think even more impressively than that, it's when you play it, you just get a 3-drop into play. Or sorry, when it dies, you get a 3-drop into play.
Yeah.
So it's a 4-mana 4/3 that gets you a 3-drop into play for no mana. And
it's probably a must kill. I mean, if you build around it at all, right? I mean, of course, there's the times when you just play it and it's a 4/3 and you're not doing the drain thing because you don't have the ability to draw extra cards. But
yeah, I mean, if you had this in play and you're playing like black-green, your opponent's probably not going to be in a hurry to kill it, but you still get to choose to block their 4/4 with it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in like black-blue, you're not going to turn this down ever.
No.
But I mean, I think it's just a great card. It's not that hard to draft the deck that can use both these or even just one of the 2 abilities, and both abilities are really good. So I would give Gixian Puppeteer an A.
I would
think
too.
It's just, great card no matter what.
It asks nothing of you and gives you a lot. Hostile Negotiations is next. It's 3 and a black for an instant at rare. It says exile the top 3 cards of your library in a face down pile, then exile the top 3 cards of your library in another face down pile. Look at the cards in each pile, then turn a pile of your choice face up. An opponent chooses one of those piles. Put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. You lose 3 life. That is funny. I like that. That's fun. So
here's a question. Do you think this is better or worse than 4-mana instant draw 3, lose 3?
It should be better.
Well,
it should be better.
You would hope it's better, but so I think it's not strictly better or worse. Like, it's not quite that simple, but basically, if you can trick the opponent, it can be slightly better because if you get the better of the 2 piles, but a lot of the times
you have the information advantage, so you should be able to do something there, right?
Yeah, and I will say that your opponent's generally going to be more scared of giving you the face down pile than the face up pile.
True.
Because the face down pile could have a bomb in it, right?
Right. And you're never going to show them the bomb.
Right. So you can actually get kind of greedy and put the best card in the face-up pile. Not if you put a Gixian Puppeteer or a Teferi in the face-up pile, they're just not going to give you that pile. Like people.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Aren't going to do that. But I think if you're able to put like a good removal spell and a decent creature and a land in that, they might still give you the face up pile because the face down pile could have something good.
I mean, I would guess that 80+% of the time they just give you the face up pile.
I think that is likely true.
Because they're just going to look at it and go, well, if there was something better, you couldn't have put it in this pile because I wouldn't have given it to you. So, yeah.
But
you may be able to trick them occasionally, but like.
But I think a good way to rate this card is what grade would we give this card that's just a draw 3? A straight up 4 mana, draw 3, lose 3. I think that card would get a B.
C+, B-. Yeah, it's fine.
I think it would be a B level card because you would get. I mean, getting to draw 3 cards is pretty good, and something like Dark Bargain, right? We just played Dominaria Sealed in the in the open, right? Draw 2 of the best 3, lose 2 for 4 mana was a pretty good card.
It was a good card,
and getting an extra card out of the deal is not bad.
This is lose 3 life, yeah.
So I think this is probably like a C+ level card.
That's what I feel too. 3 life is a lot. There's going to be times when you just can't cast. You can't afford to say, I'm going to spend 4 mana.
There's also going to be times when they just don't let you get the best card because you're not able to construct a pile that makes them give you the face down pile.
Right. Okay. So yeah, C+ for hostile negotiations. Next is Gix's Command. So this one's 3 black for a sorcery. It's rare. Choose 2. Put 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 creature against lifelink until end of turn. Sorcery speed, kind of interesting. Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. And each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. Wow. Man, they really didn't mess around with these things.
No, and here you're almost always going to choose the last mode, make them sack their biggest creature. And what I want to choose usually is the return 2 creatures, right? So you can get your really clean little 3-for-1 there. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you're going to blow up small creatures. Sometimes you're just going to make one of your creatures a +2/+2 and then lifelink and be pretty happy with that too. It's an A regardless. Like it's hard for this not to be good because look, if you're really behind and they have a bunch of small creatures, blowing up all the small creatures and then they sack and look at the order and then they sack their highest power creature, wipes their board. Or you put 2+1/+1 counters. Let's say you have a 5/5, you're losing to flyers. You put 2+1/+1 counters on your 5/5, attack and gain 7 while also doing some other stuff.
Like taking out their best blocker.
Right. Or if you're in a spot where the board's kind of stalled, getting 2 creatures back and eating their best creatures also really good. So
this is interesting because when this actually gets played, it's going to feel like an A+, right? Because it like covers all situations that come up in limited. They have one really big thing, or you're behind and need cards, or you're behind on board and need bigger stuff, or they're way ahead with a bunch of small creatures. It shores up any realistic scenario that you might face.
Unlike some of the other commands, the way the modes are spread out here, it covers so many bases. Not that any of them are not good, but like this one does a really good job of like, I got this situation covered. It's really hard to find a situation that this does not cover in some way.
I would say I would give Gix's Command at least an A.
Yeah, I could buy this being an A+ just because of how flexible it is.
I think it might be. Last black card is Painful Quandary. 3 black for an enchantment. 5 mana, do nothing, enchantment incoming. It is rare. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card.
So this is a reprint.
Don't fall for these trips. Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it had a Johnny on it, I think, the first time. I don't remember exactly which set it was from. I want to say one of the like Shadowmoor type sets maybe or something.
Hey, let me look. It's from Scars of Mirrodin.
Scars of Mirrodin, there we go.
Yeah.
But regardless, like whatever your first read on this, if you haven't played with this before, it's worse than that.
It's way
Cards
worse.
that give your opponents the option are really bad, and this hits 2 things which don't really overlap, where if you play this and your opponent's at 20, they're just going to pay 5 life the first 2, maybe even 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to have done much. Or if you play this and they're at low life, they can maybe discard some cards.
This is, I would give this an F.
I think it's maybe a D because there's some matchups like out of the sideboard. Maybe it's like a sideboard C or something, or sideboard B. Like imagine we're both playing control decks and you drop this on turn 5.
True.
Like,
that's true.
That is going to be good. That's like the best case scenario for the card, but it is going to be good at that point.
It's worth recognizing those scenarios though. All right, Bill, sideboard C, but don't just put this in your deck. Don't just go, I'm black and I have this card, therefore it's going in. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Red. First card is Mishra's Command. So this one is red X sorcery. Choose 2. A lot of X's here. Choose target player. They may discard up to X cards. Then they draw a card for each card discarded this way. Choose yourself. This spell deals X damage to target creature. This spell deals X damage to target planeswalker. Or target creature gets +X/+0 and gains haste until end of turn.
Yeah, I think this probably is the worst command.
Looks pretty bad by command standards, but also not really cuttable.
Yeah, I mean, it's still red X, deal X to a creature is already a pretty good start. And the fact that you get to also get to rummage a bunch if you want, or just deal a bunch of extra damage to them if you have a creature in play. The putting it on the planeswalker mode feels like kind of a way to get out of having to have an extra mode on here. It feels like you kind of got cheated, but
it does feel like that.
It's okay. Mishra's Command is a B. It's just a solid removal spell. It's not a bomb like some of the other commands.
Yeah, B for Mishra's Command. Next is Feldon. Does he have his cane? He's got his cane. Feldon Ronom Excavator is 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human artificer at rare. It has haste. Feldon Ronom Excavator can't block. Okay, I already hate it. Whenever Feldon is dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Okay. When he's dealt damage, though, not when he deals damage.
Right.
So you get in once with them, and then you like hope to trade him off and get a card back out of it. Is that kind of the...
Yeah.
He can't block.
Yeah, but it's a 2-mana 2/2 haste that when they do end up blocking him, you usually get a card back. One thing to worry about with this card, which isn't always going to come up, but if you attack with this late in the game and they block with like 6 things, you're going to get milled for like 15 cards.
What? That's true?
Yeah.
Each is an individual source of damage, or is it one group?
When it's dealt damage, exile that many cards. So just as long as it's dealt damage, you're going to exile that many cards.
Oh, whenever it's dealt damage, so it exiles as much cards as damage has been done. Yeah. So if they put 15 power on, you're exiling 15?
Yep. So you got to watch out for that.
Okay, I hate this card.
It's just good in an aggro deck, which is probably why you hate it too. But like, imagine you play this on turn 2 in an aggro deck, you hit them, and then next turn they play something. Are they just not going to block it? If they do block it, you draw a card. If they don't block it for a bunch of turns, you got 6-8 damage in. And then when they do finally block it, you get a card out of it.
I am not impressed by that at all. Like, what if they block it with a 2/3?
Well, maybe don't attack into a 2/3. You don't have to do that, but you can get your card back at least.
My point is, you play it on turn 2, you attack it, and they go 2/3 go.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-mana 2/2. It can get bricked by that, but at least there you can still exchange it for a card if you want, which is better than most 2/2s. Look,
is it better than most 2/2s? Because I like the ability to block a lot. Like when that comes.
If you're in the market for 2-mana 2/2 hastes, you usually don't mind that drawback so much. Look, I think the card's a C, but I would play in my aggro decks and not play it in my like mid-range or control decks. In your aggro deck, you should play this card.
I'm giving it an F.
That's not an F. Come on, that's ridiculous.
Is it ridiculous?
Yeah.
I really don't think this card's very good.
It's good in your aggro decks.
I don't think that's true.
How is it not good in aggro? It's a 2-mana 2/2 haste that when you cash it in, you get a card out of it.
But you don't get to cash it in is what I'm saying. Cashing it in would mean trading it for another one and then replacing a card. If it just gets eaten by a 4/4, that's not... I'm not ahead on cards. I'm behind.
Well, so if you've accepted that you're playing 2-mana 2/2s in your deck, getting to exchange this for another card is still good. You should play this card in your aggro decks.
I am not that high on 2/2 haste for 2. Like, I'm not excited by that, even in an aggro deck. I think it's fine.
I think every red-white deck should not cut this card.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think that it's a great card, but I think it's not a cuttable card in your aggro decks. If you're red-black aggro, you should play this card.
Okay.
Also,
so you can sacrifice it?
Well, if you do have a way to ping this, by the way, if you can ping it for 1, you get to keep.
Now you're talking business. I like it if I can abuse it myself. But
look, I understand you don't like attacking very much, but
that's not true.
In your attacking decks, 2-mana 2/2 haste is not that bad. And this is better than that.
I think it's mediocre. And I think that the card then expires very, very quickly on the battlefield if your opponent wants it to.
Okay, well, if 2-mana 2/2 haste is mediocre, which I'll grant you, it's mediocre, not great. This is better than that.
Well, it's not, though, because it can't block.
Which I think is less of a drawback than the advantage.
I see. And I don't, because I think that even aggro decks have to block a lot. Like there's a lot of times where you're like, oh, I'm behind.
Yeah, you do have to block sometimes. Yeah. I mean, that much is true.
And also I don't like the fact that my opponent can, like, if we're racing, they're just like, sure, I'll take the 2. Like if I'm going to win the race anyway, like they have just too much say over. I hate you, Feldon Ronom Excavator. Take your cane and go away.
It's not even a cane. Look at how tall that thing is.
Yeah, it's more like a walking stick. We were lied to all these years. Brotherhood's End. Look at that artwork. 1 red for a sorcery at rare. Choose 1. Brotherhood's End deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Or destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Just going right in the sideboard thing, or is this a main decker for you?
This is a main decker if you're a deck that can realistically cast the first mode, because that's the more useful of the 2 modes.
Because 3 is a lot. Like that's approaching board sweeper on many
it's
boards.
Anger of the Gods, right? Like that card.
Yeah.
So what always holds these cards back in limited is that most red decks are like low curve, would love to open a Feldon sort of decks.
Right.
And
all in on Feldon.
and those decks have a less of a need for like sweepers, but if you do want a sweeper, this is a good one. And the fact that it can blow up a bunch of Power Stones and other junk if you want is kind of nice. Okay.
So would you put it in build around? Like, do you anticipate the red decks in this set? Like, would there be red decks where you're like, yeah, no, I can't really, my Feldon deck, I can't really put this in here?
Yeah. I mean, like I would expect you to not play this in like red-white almost ever.
Okay.
To play this most of the time in red-blue, because if it's like a red-blue spells artifact deck, sometimes you'll have a slow start and you're happy to play this. Red-black, I need to shake it out a little more. My guess is it's not great in red-black because you're still going to play some cheap creatures. And then red-green's going to love this because they're like a ramp deck, and having a way to punish people for overextending early is great. So it's overall like probably a C+ level card. Some decks will want it, some decks won't. And the decks that want it will rate it a little higher, and the decks that won't just won't take it. Yeah,
and when you have it in the right deck, it's going to play like a B or even a B+. Next card is Draconic Destiny. Man, speaking of great artwork, geez. 1 red for a mythic rare enchantment. It's an aura, and it enchants a creature. So we were talking on the Commons and Uncommons review about how they have to push the enchant creature auras to get me to like kind of pay attention. This one's mythic. Let's see what they did. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying, haste, and pay 1 mana. This creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It's a dragon in addition to its other types. And when enchanted creature dies, return Draconic Destiny to its owner's hand. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic.
There you go. That's the one. That's incredible. What was the white card that did something similar to this? Do you remember that?
Yeah. The +4 Angelic Destiny.
I
play
see.
On words here.
So here we are. Yeah.
I mean, what's going to happen is you're going to play this. You're going to whack them for like 7 damage or 6 damage or something. They have to kill the creature, and then you'll get to do it again. And if they don't have an instant speedway, because if they have an instant speedway, they can at least, take 1 hit, or next turn do it in the middle of combat, and then you kind of take a turn off. Mm-hmm. If they don't have an instant speedway, they're in a world of trouble. It is worth noting that it's off when enchanted creature dies, so Bounce and Exile still does stop this, but this card is a beating.
That card is an absolute beating. When you play this card, make sure you're very aware. Look, if they have Bounce or Exile, there's probably nothing that you could do. So you get your big hit in, they untap, and they take care of business. But if they have regular removal, they can kill the creature out from underneath this, meaning you're like, target my creature with Draconic Destiny. They're like, kill it. Destiny will go to the yard. You're not going to get it back. So you want to make sure that you have a window where you feel really confident that you can resolve it. And if you do, you should probably go for it on almost anything. Just get it onto the battlefield and start smashing. Because imagine you do it on your random 2/2. They're going to have to use something on that or they're going to die. And if they're using real removal on your random 2/2, you're probably in a pretty good place anyway. If this goes unchecked, or if you get to bounce it a couple of times, like, it's over. Like, they're just going to get slammed on. I would go B plus for Draconic Destiny. Look, this card's super powerful. It is definitely a card that you would never cut from really any deck that could cast it, I don't think. So that's really good, but it doesn't have the same A level that I think of when I think of cards that get to that level, because you need to have a creature on the battlefield. You need to be wanting to attack. Yes, this thing can make your guy a little bit better of a blocker, but I don't think that that's really why you're playing the card or whatever. And you are taking on risk. It's not like resolve this, you win the game. If you put this on the stack, they might kill your creature, they might bounce it, they might exile it, and you actually got 2 for 1. That's a big downside. So I would go B plus for Draconic Destiny. What do you think?
I have it A minus. I not a dramatic difference, though. I like it a little more than you do.
That's ridiculous. A minus for that card. Mechanized, you're going to put that on Felden. Send me a screenshot at some point. Mechanized Warfare. 1 red for an enchantment at rare. If a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +1 instead. How much does this add up, right? These type of effects usually look small, but then kind of end up on the board. You're like, oh, wow, that creature actually traded. Oh, the burn spell actually kills that thing now. Kind of upgrades a lot of your stuff, but you're paying a steep price. It's a whole card.
Yeah, I don't think this one's great. It basically gives all your red and artifact creatures +1/+0. And I'm not that excited about that. Like, yes, it also makes it so your red spells that deal damage deal 1 extra damage, but this isn't constructed where you can build a deck with all red cards and a bunch of like multi-ping effects and all that. Right. I just think it's an F, actually. Like, okay. If you had a spell that if this was straight up all your red creatures get +1/+0, like, you would not play that card.
No,
like, that's not a good card. This isn't that much better than that.
No, it's not. Yeah, because how many artifact creatures are you going to have? A few, but not the rest of your deck. And you are going to be playing another color in most scenarios. So F for Mechanized Warfare. Next is Visions of Phyrexia. This is 2 red for an enchantment at rare. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. And at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't play a card from exile this turn, create a tapped Power Stone token. So you play this, it does nothing. That's a big hit. But then on your turn, you're, for most scenarios, you're drawing 2 cards a turn. And even in the times when you don't, you're getting a useful resource out of it. It's slow, but yeah, it feels like if you can buy yourself a little bit of time. I'm thinking like maybe, red, black or something like that, a bunch of removal. This is the type of card that could do serious work for you.
You're not actually correct in that it doesn't do something. It does make a Power Stone your first turn.
Oh, it does anyway.
Because you didn't play a card from exile.
Oh, of course. Wow. So you get spotted a Power Stone?
Yeah, this card's amazing. It's nice. 4 mana to get a Power Stone and just draw 2 cards a turn the rest of the game. And if you happen to not want to play the card, you just get another Power Stone. I
love it. This card's cool. I wish it wasn't in red.
This card's great.
Give me a green card like this.
Well, this is a red-green ramp card or red-blue or just any red deck that can play it. It's just a good card.
Yeah.
I would just give this an A. Like, I think Visions of Phyrexia is just a really strong card.
All right. I like A- for it, but that is a much different gap than B+ to A-. Tyrant of Kerr Ridges is next, or Kerr Ridges. It's 4 red for a 4/5 dragon at rare. It's got flying. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to any target. It also has fire breathing. You can pay red to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. Well, that's just an unmitigated bomb.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do, right? It's a 6 mana 4/5 flyer to eat something when it comes into play. So yeah, I'm in for that.
Yeah, these are about as good as they get as well. This is an easy A for Tyrant of Kerr Ridges. This is also the type of card that can creep into that A+ range. I know, you think, oh, it's a dragon, whatever, but these type of cards that stabilize the board from a pretty difficult position can really do work. And a 4/5 flyer blocks almost everything, and 4 damage kills most creatures. So this actually fits that description. I would give it an A.
Yeah, easy A for Tyrant of Kerr Ridges.
Yeah, they didn't really make that one difficult. Over the Top. You ever seen that movie?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's Sly Stallone, and he plays a trucker whose dream is to win an arm wrestling competition.
Sounds awful.
There you go. 5, he wins it. 5 red for a sorcery at rare. Each player reveals a number of cards from the top of their library equal to the number of non-land permanents they control, puts all the permanent cards they reveal this way onto the battlefield, and puts the rest in their graveyard.
So basically, everyone gets to dump a bunch of permanents into play, equal to the amount of permanents you have. This is an
nonsense. These are just nonsense because you have to pay the mana and the card.
It also reads if you have a massive advantage, your advantage becomes more massive.
Right. It's a win more card. It also can be lose more, where if you don't have that advantage and you have this card, on top of it, you have to pay 7 mana and a card and then say go, and your opponent gets to untap with all of their new permanents.
Yeah.
That's an F. Let's move on to green. Next, first green card is Teething Wormlet. Is that what you call Santi?
Yeah.
He is teething, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's not happy about it, which means that we're not happy about it.
Well, let's see if the Teething Wormlet performs here. It's green for a 1/1 worm. It's rare. Teething Wormlet has Death Touch as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. And whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Teething Wormlet. Wow. I mean, it's a build around, but if you have artifacts entering the battlefield at any reasonable clip, this card's great.
Yeah. And then once it gets up to 3 artifacts in play, which isn't super hard, it has Death Touch, at which point it's probably also a 3/3 or something, because if you can play this and have it be Death Touch immediately if you already have a bunch of artifacts, but if you played this first, you even got to kind of get the value from all of those artifacts coming into play too.
Yeah, the cost is interesting on it because it is where you would want it to be. It costs 1 mana. You can get it down on the battlefield and then just do your normal curve out where Power Stones are coming in or you're casting artifacts and then it's growing and doing the thing. The downside, of course, to cards like this are sometimes you draw them in the late game when you've already cast your stuff and it makes for a particularly bad top deck in those scenarios. But even then, you get a Death Toucher, and that's a relevant thing, assuming that you've got the artifacts on the board. I like Teething Wormlet. This card seems like a really solid 1-drop. It is a build around. If you're not doing artifacts, it's really not doing much for you. So make sure that you are. But I mean, that's just going to happen in this set, right?
Yeah, I don't think this card's too hard to make work. I would give it a B and just keep in mind you need a bunch of artifacts.
Santi gets an A. Teething Wormlet gets a B. Awaken the Woods. This is green X for a sorcery at Mythic. It says create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. They're affected by somebody. So they're dryad. Are they lands?
Yeah, they're dryad arbors. They're literally dryad arbors. They're 1/1 forests that tap for a green.
Okay. Okay, so let's use case this. On turn 3, you play this. It's a ramp spell.
Yeah, it's a little 1/1 ramp spell.
And then turn 7 or 8, you can kind of flood the board with these things.
Yeah, I think a good way to look at this is it's not good on 3. I think on 3 it's pretty weak. It's actually pretty good on 4, which is really important because imagine you spend your turn 4 playing this, you get 2 Llanowar Elves, 2 Dryad Arbors.
Yeah.
And then on turn, next turn you have 7 mana. And on 5 mana, it's a pretty good ramp spell. 6 mana, it's a really good ramp spell if you're already in that market. Now you're up to 10 mana, you can cast the 10/10 Reach Trample for 10.
Yeah.
And then late in the game, you draw it and you cast it for 9 mana. Then, you got a whole army. So it is what X spells kind of promise, right? Which is it's good at most points in the game. And if you have to cast it on turn 3 because your hand's all 5-drops and you want to play one on turn 4, then that also works. I mean, I think that the card overall is just fine.
Yeah, it actually seems pretty good. I also like that it enables big ramp, and it is also a big ramp payoff. It is.
That's
both
where you
want to
be, right?
Yeah, I would go B+ for Awaken the Woods.
Yeah, I like B+ for Awaken the Woods. It's a good card.
Yeah, I mean, if you do it for 4, that's a big board presence. That stalls things out pretty nicely. Next is Fauna Shaman. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Elf Shaman at Rare. You can pay a green, tap it, and discard a creature card to search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. This card's dope. This thing's really sweet.
Yeah, it's solid. One of the problems I have with Fauna Shaman is that spending mana and discarding a creature is a decent cost, even though you're upgrading. But I like the combination of a 2-mana 2/2 that you can block with and something on turn 7 that you can realistically activate. It's also kind of a nice combo with unearthed creatures. You know, you can get your like little half card of value, though. Unearthing a creature is a lot less good than like flashback, right? Like it's not actually massive. So
no,
I would give Punish Shaman a B. I think it's a card that I'm happy with. I wouldn't cut, and I'm not like taking first pick.
Yeah, I think it's a B as well. You're not giving up anything except for the mana, right? And sometimes you're gaining a lot by activating this card. Next is Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. This is 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary elf druid scout. It's rare. Tap. Add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. It also adds whenever.
Why do they have to say creature or creature card?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? They could just cut that. I don't want to listen to the actual rules behind it, but I can't believe that that's correct.
That is weird. I almost stumbled on it because I haven't seen that written that way. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna and untap it.
Fantastic card. I mean,
wow, that's a beating. Yeah, that thing's great.
There's a ton of expensive creatures in this set, so just a 3-mana creature that can tap for 2 mana for creatures is already great, and then she even pays you off for casting big creatures. So B+ for Gwenna for me.
Do you want to take away any grade for creature card?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think templating, yes,
slide.
Gets a downside.
I agree. B+. Okay, so what do I do with this next one? I go to Titania.
Titania, Voice of Gaia is 1 green for a 3/4 legendary creature elemental at Mythic with reach. Wow. It says whenever one or more land cards are put in your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. So that's discarding, milling, being destroyed, any of those things. Mm-hmm. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in your graveyard and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, which is a rare in the set, meld them into Titania, Gaia's Incarnate. Honestly, I don't think that the meld is ever going to happen and isn't relevant. I don't even want to read Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Like if you get these 2 rare, a mythic plus a rare plus 4 lands in your graveyard, it melds into this just giant monster that does a bunch of stuff. But
okay.
It will not happen for either of us in the entire course of this format, and I would bet it would happen to very few of our listeners. So mostly this is 3 mana for a 3/4 reach that if you mill a land, you gain 2 life. That's fine.
I'm kind of in for that, actually. Yeah. I mean, the stats are actually pretty good. 3/4 reach for 3 is powerful. It's just not that exciting. Yeah.
So that's like a B-. It's a fine card.
Okay. What about Fade from History?
It's 2 green for a sorcery at rare. It says each player who controls an artifact or enchantment creates a 2/2 green bear and then destroy all artifacts and enchantments.
No.
So it gives them a bear and then blows up all their stuff. I could see this in a deck with no artifacts, but you would have to pretty reliably be killing like 2 of their artifacts before, or 3 of their artifacts. Even killing 2 is not that great, but killing 3 is pretty good.
What if they're Power Stones?
Well, the thing is, if they're Power Stones, they have other artifacts. You can just wait on this. You just wait for them to cast whatever it is they're casting off the Power Stones.
Yeah.
So I would give this probably like a sideboard like B+.
Oh, really? You like it to bring it in against those decks?
Yeah, I mean, there's some matchups where this card's going to be very good.
Okay. Sideboard B+ for Fade from History. Last green card is Titania's Command. Here we go, the green one. 4 white for a sorcery. So 6 mana for this command. Choose 2. Exile target player's graveyard. You gain 1 life for each card exiled this way. Wow. Okay. Search your library for up to 2 land cards. Put them on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. 6 mana ramp spell. All right. Create 2 2/2 green bear creature tokens. Now we're in business. And last but not least, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Wow. They really kind of buried the lead there, didn't they?
Yeah, so this is baseline. Put 2 4/4s into play because you get to make the 2 bears and then put 2 +1/+1 counters on each of them and 2 +1/+1 counters on all your other creatures. We clearly have found the default mode on this.
Yes.
But if you need a bunch of life, you can exile a graveyard and gain 7 life. And if you need to ramp, you can just make 2 bears and ramp 2 and then play your 10 drop. So an A for Titania's Command. Just a fantastic card.
Seems fantastic. That moves us to white. First white card is called Soul Partition. This is 1 and a white for an instant. It is rare. It says exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. So you get 2 mana instant speed, exile a non-land permanent. So that part is, of course, top tier, best removal you could really ask for, but they just can cast it again if they want to pay the extra 2.
I mean, it's basically a bounce spell that tacks on 2, or you can exile your own thing and it doesn't actually cost you 2 more, though you could still play it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're a deck that wants a bounce spell, this is better than most because it does actually tax them. Like if you bounce their 6-drop with this, you exile it, they have to pay 8 to bring it back. That's pretty good.
It is just not to be confused with the removal spell is kind of the...
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like a C to me.
Yeah, I would say C for Soul Partition.
Which is kind of weird because we don't give that many C's on the Rare and Mythic Rare, but there's one. In the Trenches is next. It's 1 white for an enchantment. It's Mythic Rare. Creatures you control get +1/+1. These type of effects are usually pretty good and limited, especially in white. You can pay 5 and a white to exile target non-land permanent you don't control until Into the Trenches leaves the battlefield, and you can activate this at sorcery speed and only 1 time. Dang, that card's sweet. Man. So they made a combination of sort of like a slow Oblivion Ring and a Crusade effect or an Anthem effect or whatever we call them. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, this card is, if this doesn't get an A+, I don't know what does, because Glorious Anthem is like an A, and this adds a free Oblivion Ring to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to pay 6, but doesn't cost you an extra card. Yeah, A+ for In the Trenches. That card is fantastic. Next is Kayla's Command. All right, here we go. 1 white for a sorcery. It's rare. Choose 2. Create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. All right, so get a 2/2. Next one is put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike until end of turn. All right. And then search your library for a basic Plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And the last mode is you gain 2 life and scry 2. This is for 3 mana. This is a cheap one.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a bunch of little cheap options. The most likely one you want is to get a 2/2 and then either put a counter on it or gain 2 and scry 2. But sometimes you'll get a Plains. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if the default mode ends up being get a 2/2 and then gain 2, scry 2. That's a really nice turn 3 to propel your draw forward. Make sure you hit your land drops or find you some action while still developing your board. And then, of course, if you have a flyer or if the board situation dictates it, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control and it gains double strike. Can be an ender. That can just end the game. If you have anything with trample, that can be amazing if you're in green or something like that. Yeah, I mean, this thing looks great. I would say B+ for Kayla's Command. Maybe it's an A-. I don't know. It's only 3 mana. It doesn't have quite the profound impact that the other ones do, but they also cost more.
Yeah, I would say this is closer to a B than an A when it comes to this. I mean, getting a 3 mana 2/2, gain 2 life, scry 2, or a 3 mana 3/3, or in this case, double strike and +1/+1 on a flyer. Like, it's good early, good late. It's got a lot of action to it.
Yeah, I think B+ is good for it. Next is Kayla's Reconstruction. It is white X for a sorcery at rare. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifact and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. No.
Yeah, I don't think that this is where you want to be.
So I get to look at 7 no matter what, but I can, like, if I know where I'm at, I might want to just pay 3 for this because I'm on average going to hit 3 anyway, and I can just pick the 3 that I hit and go for it. I don't think I like Kayla's Reconstruction. The real issue here is that most limited decks do have a pretty gradual curve out where, you'll have some good 2s and 3s in there that you can hit. But I mean, you're going to have 4s, 5s, 6s in this set. You might have a 9-ball in there that has prototype or something. You're not going to be able to put that in. So I don't like the whiff potential on a card like this. And even if you hit, it's you don't win. Right? It's not like if I do this for 4 and I hit all 4, I'm going to be way ahead, but I got like 2 2-drops, 2 3-drops. I spent 7 mana on that. Yes, that would be good. That's the best case. Like that's the thing that doesn't happen very often. And of course, there's going to be times where you just outright miss. I would give Kayla's Reconstruction a build around C. I think that if you really focus on making as many targets as possible, you could probably put this in your deck and play it for like 2 and get 2 things out of it and be a little bit ahead on mana. But that is not that exciting to me. So I would put it at build around C. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's just going to be expensive enough and you're going to miss often enough that most of the time you're not going to want to go down this route. And part of the problem I have too is at the point in the game where this gets good, sometimes 3-mana creatures and artifacts just aren't actually going to be that impressive.
They have 2 5-drops on the board and like none of your things can get through. So not that great. Next is Loran of the Third Path. This is 2 and a white for a legendary human artificer at rare. It's a 2/1 with vigilance, which is kind of weird. And when Loran of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Fantastic. And tap you and target opponent each draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, you would always play it without the tap to draw card ability.
Yes. The vigilance is weird, right? The 2/1 vigilance for 2, like you'll take it, but it's kind of, they either block or don't. And you're not gonna be able to attack that often with your 2/1. But when it ETBs and just snipes anything, you're going to feel real good, right? I mean, you're going to feel super, super happy about it. So if that's the case, I would give it like a baseline at like B. What does that last ability add though? The tap you and target opponent each draw a card. It's even, right? Like you're both getting the card. In fact, if anything, it probably slightly favors you because you get the first chance to actually play that card.
I love this ability. In Love Song of Night and Day, the saga from the last set, I chose the first mode a lot more than most people. And
this is a little better than that because you do get access to the card first and you didn't there.
Yeah, though you had the play pattern. If you're on the play and they don't have a 2-drop, you make them discard if you do that on turn 3.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen here. But basically, it gives you an advantage. And the main way is what you said. You use it end of their turn and then you get to play it first. The other is if you're ahead on board, this kind of works out better for you because you can imagine a game where you're like being really aggressive and they're not going to get to cast all the cards in their hand anyway. So this helps you refill. Or if you're playing a deck that has better cards than them or you have a sweeper and you're setting it up but at the end of the day, the reason this card is so great, it's a Restoration Sage. 3 mana, 2/1, blow up an artifact or enchantment. Fantastic. So I would give this a B+ because I think that ability is really good in the set.
That's where I came down to. Next is Siege Veteran. This is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier at rare. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Dang. And whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, which this is, but it only counts other ones, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Wow, that is absurd.
I mean, just the first ability, again, it's Luminarch Aspirant.
Right.
It's a 3 mana 2/2 Luminarch Aspirant, which is like an A- by itself.
I was going to say you'd pay 4 mana for that. Like this card's just insane.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card. And then, of course, getting the ability to get random soldiers when your soldiers die means you're more likely to even have counters for this. So very, very, very good.
Really, really good. I would go A- for Siege Veteran. If you build around it, it's just a straight up A.
I think it's probably just close to an A. Like you play this, immediately gets a +1/+1 counter. If they don't kill it, they lose.
Yeah, no, that's true. And of course, oftentimes you want to spread those counters around in case they do kill it. Keep that in mind. So we'll go A for Siege Veteran. Next is Tokasia's Welcome. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. It's rare. It says whenever 1 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. I just hate cards like this, Luis. You play it and kind of nothing happens. And then if you can start to chain these things together, you can generate advantage. But the obvious comparisons to cards like this are cards like Divination, where you pay once, you get the 2 cards up front. You're not going to get any more after that, but you get them. You can hit your next land drop. You can do the thing. And then with these, you play it, nothing happens. Then probably the next turn you get to trigger it once. And then if you get to trigger it again, you're even money with Divination. And if you don't, you're actually behind it. And remember, Divination's like a C- or something. It's not, some super sought after card that we have. And yes, this one does technically have the ability to kind of go off over the course of 3, 4, 5 turns where you're, playing a bunch of these, smaller effect type creatures and stuff like that. But I find these cards too clunky. And they also seem to have a problem being in the deck that has a bunch of 2 and 3 drops and stuff like that, and that they don't actually affect the board. And you're drawing a bunch of more 2 and 3 drops, and sometimes that doesn't even get you ahead.
I like this card.
Okay, go on.
I think that in the deck with all low drops, you can just play this on turn 5, then play a 2-mana creature and immediately draw a card. And then from then on, it's just like draw an extra card every turn.
It is not.
It's pretty close to that. If your deck has like 15 creatures that cost 3 or less, which is a theme in this deck,
Okay. I wasn't assuming that you'd have 15 3 or less. If that's like true, 12, then yeah.
I think like 12 is not crazy. Between your 2s and 3s, having like 10 to 12 isn't crazy. And then maybe you have 2 1-drops too, because look, true. It's not just because you have this one card. It's because you have this, you have the Hero of the Dunes, you have so and so, and it's
so
a
there's
theme
a
in the
build
set.
around component here, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I do think this is a build around. I think you can't put this in your like white blue deck and be like, wow, this is going to be great. But sometimes you can.
Okay.
It's like a build around B. Like,
can you compare it to divination?
So it's in the deck that it's good in, it's better than divination, because I think if unchecked, will draw you 3 to 4 cards.
Okay.
In deck, and don't play it in decks where it's bad.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's kind of how I don't look at this as like a way to hit land drops, though. You can play this turn 3, then turn 4 you would have missed your land drop, but now you play your 3-mana 2/1 or whatever, and you draw a card immediately.
And theoretically, you don't need as many lands in a deck that's centered around cheaper creatures, right? Like hitting your 5th land drop isn't so critical. Okay, so you say build around B for Takeshi's Welcome. All right, you convinced me. I'm in. Myrel, Shield of Argive is 3 and a white for a 3/4 legendary human soldier at Mythic Rare. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. This is one of the most annoying static abilities ever. What was the angel that did this? Oh, so annoying. Whenever Myrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens where X is the number of soldiers you control. And it is worth noting that she is, in fact, a soldier.
Fantastic card. Wow. You know your opponent's not going to, mess with you. They can't have combat tricks. They can't do any of that stuff. And then you immediately get 1 soldier. And then if Myrel survives, which is a little easier because they can't play tricks, next turn you're probably going to get like a bunch of soldiers because you're going to get minimum 2 if she survived plus the 1 she made last turn. But if you had imagine you had 1 soldier to start with, you got 2 immediately, and then next turn you're going to get 4 more.
and they can't cast spells.
Yeah, and they can't do anything.
So you just get to know exactly what combat's going to look like. You can cast spells. All right, well, we'll just give Myrel, Shield of Argive an A and move to the gold cards in the set. There's not that many of these, actually, but there's a few. The first one up is called Harbin Vanguard Aviator, and this is blue-white for a 3/2 legendary human soldier at rare with flying. So, wow, right on theme and also pushed. It says whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying until end of turn. That's pretty akin to whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, you win the game, right? Like, what's the scenario where attacking with 5 creatures that all now are bigger and have flying doesn't just finish off your opponent? So This card's just insane, right? Good early, great late, maybe even great early, great late, and also on theme. Like, that's just insane.
Yeah, I like A- for Harbin. Just playing it on turn 2 is fantastic, and sometimes you'll play it on turn 7 and your opponent's like, wow, I'm dead next turn.
Right. And they're looking at it going, I'm going to die unless I kill that 2-drop.
Also, actually, if you have 5 soldiers and you cast this, you immediately get the benefit. So
it's an overrun on top of all the other fun stuff?
Yeah, maybe just straight up A. I don't know. There's not really a situation where this is bad.
Right, because if you cast it on turn 2, like, if they don't kill it immediately, it's getting in for 9 damage before they can do anything.
Yep.
All right, A for Harbin. Next is Urza, Lord Protector. So this is 1 blue-white for a 2/4 legendary human artificer, and Urza is a mythic. It says artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's quite a few different things, although it is missing creature. And then it has the activated ability 7. If you both own and control Urza, Lord Protector, and an artifact named the Might Stone and Weak Stone, exile them, then meld them into Urza Planeswalker, and you activate that at sorcery speed. And what the heck does Urza Planeswalker do? Urza Planeswalker. Oh my God.
So it just has again, vortex? I don't think it really matters because you're not really combining your mythic plus your rare plus 7 mana like in a realistic sense. If you do, it's great, sure. But I don't think that's going to help people really evaluate the card because it doesn't really affect the card very much.
Okay.
What this is a 3 mana 2/4 that makes your artifact, instants, and sorceries cheaper, which is fine. It's like a B-. It's not anything crazy.
B- for Urza. And yes, try to do the thing. It is cool, but we're trying to help you garner wins, and that's not going to be a part of the equation. Next is another Urza. This is Urza Prince of Krug. This is 2 blue-white for a 2/3 legendary human artificer. This one's just regular rare. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2, and you can pay 6 mana to create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types.
Yeah, this is a great card. I mean, you're going to play this and get a decent amount of stats just off of the static artifact creatures get +2/+2, and then if you have 6 mana lying around, you get to make additional copies of things that are going to be 1/1s that get +2/+2. So I like an A- for Urza. I think it's going to add a lot of stats to the board and have a threatening activated ability.
I think if we go to A-, we should put build around tag on it, probably.
Sure, it's more of a build around when you're at that point, but you're still going to get a lot of artifacts.
I would still play it in any deck that had artifacts. I just would put it more in the BB plus range.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great mana sink, though. And we should, of course, mention that you can pay for the mana ability with Power Stones. Next is Mishra, Claimed by Gix. This one is 2 black-red for a legendary Phyrexian human artificer at Mythic Rare. For your 4 mana, you're getting a 3/5, not too bad. And whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If Mishra, Claimed by Gix, and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, and you both own and control them, exile them, then meld them into Mishra, Lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. And it's like a 9/9. And that has like, you get a bunch of stuff when it ETBs.
Yeah, sure. I think that
I love how hand wavy you are with the meld.
I don't think melds are a very cool or fun mechanic. I don't like it, and it doesn't really like. We played with this mechanic in Eldritch Moon, and
did we though?
What I was about to say is I never had anyone meld, and I played that format a lot.
I did too. Yeah, it would be more accurate to say that mechanic was in Eldritch Moon.
Right,
so we never actually
that
played
mechanic existed. But a 4 mana 3/5 that whenever you attack, they get drained for 1. It doesn't even mean that Mishra has to attack. It's like you play Mishra, attack with 2 creatures, you drain them for 2. The next turn, attack with 3 creatures and drain them for 3. It's
nasty,
really threatening card. So Mishra's just an A for a 4 mana 3/5 with such a powerful ability.
5 toughness. That is really rough. And plus, you get black-red removal spells to help clear out double blocks. That's fantastic. Next is Mishra, Tamer of Makfawa. This is the rare one. So this one's 3 red-black for a 4/4 legendary human artificer. And it says permanents you control have ward, sacrifice a permanent. In other words, if they want to target one of your permanents, they have to sacrifice a permanent of their own just to do so. It also has unearth. Or it says each artifact card in your graveyard has unearth. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. And the unearth is 1 black-red for those artifacts.
Yeah, this is a really threatening card. You play this, now you get to kind of rebuy all your artifacts, and then it also is really annoying if they ever want to target any of your stuff. So,
what's the use on the artifacts? Like, you get 1 more use if it's like an activated ability, or 1 more attack if it's a creature?
Well, or if you're black-red and you can try to combine it with sacrifice stuff, you're just getting a lot of extra value. It takes a little bit of work. I don't think it's just straight up free here.
Okay.
But I do think that that Mishra is going to be the kind of card your opponent's going to play, and you're not going to be very happy about it.
Definitely. Seems solid. You know, it looks like a B to me.
Yeah, I like B for Mishra.
Next is Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard. This is green-red for a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier at rare. So a 3/3 for 2 mana, and you can sacrifice Hajar. And it says legendary creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. So not a super great activated ability, but you do get a 3/3 for 2 mana.
If you're red-green, you're going to play this. It's a B. It's a 2 mana 3/3, and that's good enough.
And just keep that activated ability in mind, because there are legends in this set, but that's not the focus of the card. What does a Sarenth Great Worm do?
This is a 4 red-green for a 7/6 Mythic Rare worm. She has trample, and it says whenever a land enters the battlefield, create a Power Stone. Tapped. Everything that creates Power Stones is tapped.
So it's landfall, make a Power Stone, and it's a 7/6 trample for 6?
Not quite. There's not a lot of words on the card, but it actually is a little surprising when you actually read them again.
What did I miss?
It triggers off their lands too.
Oh, a land enters the battlefield.
Yep.
So the question is, how useful are Power Stones after you've already got 6 mana? And the answer is a little bit.
Still fine.
It's not 0. It's not as useful perhaps earlier, but we've seen so many activated abilities and mana sinks that you would be able to use those for sure. This is a little light on the, like, if you told me 6 mana, Mythic Rare Worm, I think I would have actually gone higher on what they would have done than 7/6 with trample, but I'm kind of glad they didn't. This is a much more tamed, this is a removable card, right? Like, you can actually kill this somehow.
This isn't a bomb, but it is a good card. Now, you would never cut it out of a red-green deck.
No.
Look, we've played a lot of Colossal Dreadmaws, a lot. It's been in every set.
Yeah.
And that card was always fine. And then this card is quite a bit better because red-green is the ramped color. You do get Power Stones off their land, and it's a 7/6 instead of a 6/6. That's already a little bit better.
I love this card. This card's really cool. Would you give it a B+? Would you give it an A-?
I would give it a B+.
Yeah, me too. B+ for Sarenth Great Worm. Next is Legions to Ashes. This is 1 black white for a sorcery at rare. Exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls, and all tokens that player controls with the same name as that permanent. So you do get to just sorcery speed exile a non-land permanent with this thing. Like, that's your baseline.
That's basically all it is. Like, yes, you can kill all their Power Stones, but that's not really something you're going to do. So it's a 3 mana sorcery speed exile any permanent, which is like a B+.
Yeah, B+ for Legions to Ashes, and it has slight upside, occasionally getting more than one thing. Next is Saheeli Filigree Master. This is 2 red blue for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker Saheeli at Mythic. 3 abilities on Saheeli. +1, scry 1. You may tap an untapped artifact you control. If you do, draw a card. Okay. -2, which would leave Saheeli still on the battlefield, is create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying, and they gain haste until end of turn. Nice. And then we'll call it the ultimate, but it's only -4, is you get an emblem with artifact creatures you control get +1/+1, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's an interesting spot for this 4 mana Planeswalker.
Oh, this is a great card. I mean, 2 blue-red sorcery, put 2 Thopters with haste into play would be a card I'm rarely cutting. Like
C+ already.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And this is quite a bit more than that. First of all, it protects you from flyers. We're always looking for that, right? Because it gets you these chumpers. And then it has +1, scry 1, draw a card if you've got artifacts laying around. And the emblem is actually really soon. If you really are turbo embleming, you can play this +1 it. If they don't kill it, next turn you emblem.
Yeah. And if that's a puts you in a great position on the board that already exists, you could actually consider doing it. But otherwise, I mean, it's like almost impossible to kill Saheeli if you turn for it, right? You make the 2 1/1s, and like, how are they getting through that? That's very difficult.
Right. You're probably able to at least trade. You're probably not going to have to double chump. And then next turn you get to +1 it and then play some things, and then maybe -2 it again, or you keep it in play, whatever it is. So
wow,
I would give Saheeli an A-. I think this card is very good.
Especially for only 4 mana. Lots of board presence, card advantage. This is actually, a slightly mitigated version of that basic Planeswalker template that we said. And you could argue that middle one is even better. Creating 2 flying blockers is like, I don't think we've seen that. So I like A- on Saheeli. What does a Deathbloom Ritualist do?
It's 3 black-green for a 3/5 Elf Warlock at rare, and it can taps for X mana of any one color or X number of creature cards in your graveyard. So, again, you're in kind of like Gilded Lotus territory, which is actually a card that's in the set. It's one of the retro artifacts where, yes, you've already spent 5 mana, you're already there, and then do you want more ramp? This set, I would argue yes, because this set has a bunch of split cards that cost 5/10 mana or 3/8 mana. So. Having a 5-drop that is pretty big, it does affect the board. It's not nothing. and also taps for 2 mana sometimes or 6 mana sometimes, who knows. That's pretty good. It's not really in Black-Green's theme in the sense that, yes, filling the graveyard is, but having huge things to ramp to isn't exactly what you're always going to be doing. But the prototype cards are good enough to run anyway. Like, the Colossus that's like a 3/5 reach trample or a 10/10 reach trample. This card's really good for that card.
Absolutely. I'm trying to never underrate having just a bunch of extra mana in this set, given the really expensive activated abilities and the prototype creatures and stuff. So I think I would run this. I mean,
yeah, you would, I think, always run this in green-black.
Yeah.
I don't know that you would necessarily have to draft around it specifically, but
right.
It naturally is going to be pretty good in your deck, I would assume.
I think that, the reason that that I say it like that is because I don't think I would run 3 black, green, 3/5 like that. That's just not good enough in Modern Limited to catch my attention. Gold card that only has, vanilla stats or whatever, but I think this one puts it over the line. I would give it like a C+ for Deathbloom Ritualist. It might be a B- if you have a bunch of stuff to spend extra mana on.
Yeah, I would say B- for Deathbloom Ritualist.
All right. Queen Kayla Bin Krug is 1 red-white for a 2/3 legendary human noble at rare. And it has a big brick of text. 4 and tap it. Discard all the cards in your hand. Then draw that many cards. Mm-hmm. You may choose an artifact or creature card with mana value 1. You discarded this way. And then do the same for artifact or creature cards with mana values 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield. And you can only do this at sorcery speed. Wow. That's actually sweet.
Yeah, this card's great. You get to basically rummage your whole hand away, right?
Yeah.
But you get to get up to 3 cards back, and more realistically, like 2, right? You discard a 2 and a 3 drop. You're not discarding 1s all that often, but that's a really good deal. You're already getting a card out of that. So
right, and remember, you get your cards back into your hand by default, but you're actually getting a rebate here.
Yeah, it's a really good deal. For every one that you get to put into play, it's like you're up a card and up mana, which pays for the expensive activated ability. Yeah. And red-white's going to have a low curve. I would give Queen Kayla an A-. Feels kind of like a must kill. Like if your opponent plays this on turn 3 and you don't kill it on turn 4, I expect them to activate it, discard 5 cards, draw 5 cards, and put 2 cards into play.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would think too. A- for Queen Kayla. That thing's sweet. Here's Thanos the Toymaker. This is 3 green-blue for a 3/5 legendary human artificer at rare. Whenever you cast a beast or bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact and is in addition to its other types. Are they going to make me do a search for how many beasts and birds there are in this set? Because I'll do it.
I mean, it's time we had to talk about the beasts and the birds, I guess.
Let's see. Or bird. What do you think the number is?
Not high enough that this is a card you should first pick, but high enough that if you already have because I think that the number I want in my deck is like 3. If I have
to make a 3/5, an otherwise vanilla 3/5 worth it.
Yeah, if I have three of those in my deck, then I think I'm okay with it, and that doesn't seem impossible to achieve.
Okay.
You just need to get 1 copy from it for this card to already be good enough.
All right. So according to this, there is 1 bird. And it's that Koilos rock, the 4 and a blue.
Yeah, that card's perfectly playable.
Yep. And let's see what it says about Beast. Beast in Bro says that there are 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1's rare, 2 uncommon, and 2 commons.
You're not really, it's not asking you to sacrifice a whole lot in terms of card quality either when you play these cards.
Yeah, and it's a huge upside. Yeah. C+ for Thanos. I build around B-. I don't know.
It's like a build around B-. There aren't enough in the set that I would first pick a Thanos, but if you're already blue-green and have the bird and 1 beast, I'd probably take it on spec and try to pick up 1 more.
Yeah. Worth noting that 2 of the beasts are green. One of them is colorless and the other 2 are black and red. So that's worth noting too. Okay. And our last gold card is Tokasia Dig Site Mentor. This is 1 green, white, blue for a 4/3 legendary human artificer. And it says creatures you control have vigilance and tap Surveil 1. And Surveil, if you don't remember, is look at the top card of your library and you can put that card in your graveyard if you want. Then it has the activated ability of 2 mana, green, green, white, white, blue, blue. 8 mana and exile Tokasia Digsite Mentor from your graveyard. Then you return any number of target artifact cards with total mana value 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can only do that at sorcery speed. So you're supposed to like get this thing down, start turbo surveilling to fill up your yard, then they kill Tokasia at some point, and then you pay a whole bunch of mana and you get a bunch of the stuff back. It's kind of cool.
My guess is this doesn't come together too often. This isn't really a 3-color format all that much.
Not at all.
And this isn't exactly like a splash card either. Like, yes, you can cast it off your blue-green splash white, but kind of the problem with that is that the activated ability, at some point you need to have 2 of each color, because if you're not using that ability, Tokasia's not actually that good.
Yeah, giving all your creatures vigilance and tap surveil 1 is very strong, but getting this thing on the battlefield's hard.
Yeah, and it does require you to have more creatures in play, and then you do kind of want artifacts in order to get some good value out of it. So
yeah,
it's kind of like a B if you can cast it. I just don't know how often you're going to.
I would give it a build around B. I mean, it does things, but it is hard to cast. Okay, that moves us to artifacts that appear in the set regularly. So the first one is Urza's Silex, which is 3 mana for a legendary artifact. It's a mythic. It has the activated ability 2 white, tap it, and exile it. Each player chooses 6 lands they control, destroy all other permanents, activate only as a sorcery. Wow. When Urza's Silex is put into exile from the battlefield, you may pay 2. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. So we have a sweeper that costs a combined total of 7 mana. It's sorcery speed only, and it does require double white. But it does really kind of wipe the board and bring everybody back to nothing.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that if you want to use it and activate it in the same turn, you're almost by definition losing a land.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Also, you're not really going to get a Planeswalker from this very often, though.
Right. It'll be clearly a big tilt when your opponent pauses and then reveals a plane. You're like, what? You know, like, come on. At least in limited. So how good is this as a sweeper? I mean, you know, the installment plan really does matter here. It isn't 7 mana. It's 3 and then 4. Of course, it's, you know, only good. It only goes in white decks, which is a problem because they're heavily creature based, soldier based, that type of stuff. It's a big reset button, though.
I mean, and if when your opponent has this, like when you play this, your opponent knows about it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be able to stop it. Like they have to then choose, like, okay, I guess I'm gonna not play into this, or I am gonna play into this. Either way, it's a little awkward for them.
You could spring them on it with Power Stones as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you do this all in one turn, then you are kind of getting,
which is more realistic.
Yes, or 7 mana. I think really what this hinges on is, does your white deck want a Wrath sweeper type card? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the white themes, like, you know, blue white soldiers, red white aggro, not so much. Black white, you know, like kind of like 3 or less, not really. Green white, putting artifacts into play, not really. Like, so I think this card doesn't have a great home. It's like a B level card, but I would downgrade it. I would just give it a C because I don't think most white decks are that interested.
Yeah, if you're interested, it does the thing. Autonomous Assembler is next. This is 5 mana for a 4/5 vigilance, and you can pay 1 mana and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target assembly worker you control. And it is an artifact creature assembly worker. It's a rare. It also has prototype for 1 and a white, and you get a 2/2 instead. Again, with vigilance and the activated ability. Seems great.
Oh, if you're not playing white, I would typically play the card because it's a 5 mana 4/5 vigilance that can grow itself. And if you are playing white, it's fantastic. Imagine just playing this on turn 2.
Oh yeah, so nasty. It reminds me of Chronomaton. Do you remember that card?
Yeah, that card is sweet.
Yeah.
But this has a lot of extra, because even if you're playing white, sometimes you're going to cast it for 5 mana.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of extra value there.
Yeah, and this is a great use of vigilance as well, right? You can attack and then kind of see what they do, and then you can put the counter on if you'd like after, get in more damage or mess with combat. I mean, I think if you're in white, you know, this is B plus A minus territory. If you're not, it's probably like a solid B.
Yeah, I like that.
Platoon Dispenser is next. It's 5 mana for a 4/6 artifact creature construct. It's mythic. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card. That's pretty good. And you can pay 3 and a white to make a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. And it happens to have Unearth for 2 white as well.
Yeah, so you can bring it back to draw a card, but
it's pretty great.
Even if your deck has no white mana, you're always going to play this card. It's a 5 mana 4/6.
Yeah,
that just draws you a card if you have 3 creatures in play.
Right, that's insane. And if you have white, it's an absolute no-brainer. Because I mean, you get to Unearth, you get to hit for 4 too. This thing's big. That adds up. Yeah, and if you have enough mana, you could even Unearth, make a 1/1 attack. Do the whole thing. Get a card at the end. A-.
I would give this card an A-, and then if you're white, it's closer to an A, but you're probably going to take this early no matter what.
What about Steel Seraph?
It's 6 mana for a 5/4 flying, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gives your choice of flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn.
Oh, we can get lifelink?
And it's got prototype. You can cast it as a 3/3 for 1 white. This is just an A.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if you're white or not. Obviously, it's better if you are, but it's just an A.
Wow, that's incredible, especially because you can give it to itself, right? And it already has flying, so you can give it vigilance or lifelink.
Yep.
So it's a 6 mana 5/5 flying lifelink at the minimum?
Yeah, this card.
On your turn?
This card is amazing. I would just give Steel Seraph an A. And yeah, it's better if you can play it for 3 mana, but you're going to be happy regardless. And you just get to play it immediately, give something lifelink. It's very, very good.
Surge Engine is next. It's 2 mana for a 3/2 artifact creature construct. It's mythic rare, and it has Defender. So you got a 2 mana 3/2 Defender, and it's got 3 different activated abilities. The first one is blue. Surge Engine loses Defender and gains this creature can't be blocked. That doesn't say until end of turn, does it?
No, it's just forever a 3/2 unblockable.
The second ability is 2 and a blue. Surge Engine becomes blue and has base power and toughness 5/4. Activate only if Surge Engine doesn't have Defender, so you can't skip steps is what it's saying here. And then if the third one is 4 blue, draw 3 cards, activate only if Surge Engine is blue and only once.
I mean, wow. I'm completely sold on just the first ability. 2 mana 3/2, the next turn you just pay a blue attack unblockable. They already are a little bit of trouble if they can't deal with it.
Totally.
Then all of a sudden you make it a 5/4. I mean, the normal curve is play this and then on, next turn make it a 3/2. Or if you have 4 mana at that point, next turn just make it a 5/4. It doesn't even need the last ability. This is a blue card. I wouldn't play it outside of blue. It's a 2 mana 3/2 Defender, no abilities. But in blue decks, this is an A. I mean, yeah, I don't really know what else you ask out of your 2 mana card.
No, it's just a beautiful card to apply a lot of pressure, and then it even gets you cards if it sticks around. This is one of the most must kills in the set. Next is Arcane Proxy. This is 7 mana for a artifact creature wizard. It's mythic rare. It's a 4/3. And when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So if you go big, it's 7 mana for a 4/3. So the power's 4. But there's a prototype cost of 1 blue, and it's a 2/1.
I'm in for this card. I mean,
yeah, that seems good.
Outside of blue decks, it's a little pricey, but you can still play good removal of this. Imagine you're playing Black Red and you have a bunch of removal spells like the 3 mana deal 3, the Power Stone or Excavation Explosion and stuff like that. Playing this to replay one of those is pretty nice. And then if you are playing blue and you have some cheap cards, even just replaying like a Curate or something, it is pretty solid.
Yeah, it really is. You don't need to do much to get value.
Disfigure or something.
Yeah, it's just good value. I like it. Let's assume that you're in blue. I mean, it looks like a B or a B+ to me.
Yeah, I would say something like that. I mean, there's going to be decks that it's a little better in those decks than other decks. The blue-red all spells deck is probably going to have this closer to like an A-, where you're always going to have a target and it's always going to be great.
Yes.
The black-red deck that has 3 removal spells that's kind of playing this as a finisher, it's just okay there.
Yeah. I just think 7 mana is very attainable here. And, if you get anything reasonable back with it, you're good to go.
Well, I mean, drafts went live earlier today. I'm 2 drafts in, and yes, expensive cards have been attainable.
Okay, there you go. Teresian Mindbreaker is next. It's 7 mana for a 6/4 artifact creature Juggernaut, and it is rare. Whenever it attacks, defending player mills half of their library, rounded up, and it has Unearth for 1 blue.
Not a big fan of this one.
Yeah, these are tough. Yeah.
The ability to mill half their library is less good than people think.
It is.
It just is. So I'm not really interested in a 7-mana 6/4 with not a great line of text. And then Unearth and doing it again, part of it is it doesn't stack very well. You mill them from 20 to 10 and then 10 to 5. You're still not. That's not necessarily going to resolve the game, you know?
Right. That's the problem, is that these type of cards usually create great stories where you almost milled them.
Yeah.
But if you run the numbers, it doesn't really pan out. It takes numerous hits to be able to do so. And at only 4 toughness here from the Mindbreaker, you know, they can choose to trade off if that is going to become a long-term issue in a lot of scenarios. I like Unearth on it. I do. It's a big hitter that comes back. But honestly, I just don't want to have anything to do with any Juggernaut that has the option to attack or not. Like, I want my Juggernauts to must attack, and you know, I don't see the word walls
really betraying the Juggernaut.
It really is. It really is. That said, this card's not bad or anything, right? Like a 7-mana 6/4, ignore all the mill stuff with Unearth, 1 blue. Is that not good?
I don't think that's good. I think you've got a lot of options that are better.
Okay. So are you going like D on the Mindbreaker?
This is a D. If you're the Power Stone deck and you're blue and you have a lot of ways to ramp and you're missing high end, sure, you can play this, but you are vaguely unhappy. Compare this to like the Golem that's like the 6/5 that gains you 6 when you play it. You can play it for 4 mana. Like, which one of those is better?
Right. It's not even close. Right. Okay. D for Teresian Mindbreaker. Next is Razorlash Transmogrant. It's 2 mana for a 3/1 zombie. It's rare, and it can't block. Oh, again, huh? This one has 4 black. Return Razorlash Transmogrant from your graveyard.
Mogrant, for what it's worth.
Transmogrant?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's not an extra R.
I added an R. Oh, my bad. All right, let's try that again. 4 black. Return Razorlash Transmogrant from your graveyard to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability costs 4 less to activate if an opponent controls 4 or more non-basic lands. I don't have to talk you out of this one, do I?
Yeah, you do. This is a good card in your black aggro decks. It's a 2-mana 3/1 that you just eventually bring it back as a 4/2. I don't know. Your opponent goes Mountain Swamp Transmogrant. You play a 2-drop. Are you happy when you block there?
No, not really.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. Look, I'm not saying this card's fantastic. It is a lot better than Felden, for what it's worth. If we're going to
I do like it better than that. The 3 power means that it trades up so much more readily.
But I think it's a solid card if you're aggro or you have a sacrifice theme. It's not great otherwise. It's a good mana sink. I don't know. Getting to cast a 6-mana 4/2 is fine. Not being able to block is a real drawback. I'm not going to say it isn't.
Okay. So what do you want to give the Transmogrant?
I mean, it's like a C+.
Okay.
It's not like a bomb or anything. It's just fine.
I'll go a little lower, C minus range for me, but I get you. Next is Transmogrant's Crown. This is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. It's rare. The equipped creature gets +2/+0, and the equip cost is 2 or black. That's interesting. And it says whenever equipped creature dies, draw a card. Huh.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Very strong card. I mean,
yeah.
Giving a creature +2/+0 means they have to trade for it. When they do, you draw a card.
Yeah. And it's cheap.
Yeah. So this is like a B+, especially if you're playing black.
Definitely. Yeah. Transmogrant's Crown. That's a legit, I mean, it is rare, so it should be. Next is Phyrexian Fleshgorger. This is 7 mana for a 7/5 artifact creature, Phyrexian Worm at Mythic. It has Menace and Lifelink, and it has Ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power. They have to pay 7 life to target the Fleshgorger, and then it has Prototype for 1 black, and it's a 3/3.
I mean, I'm really happy with this card.
Is that the best card in the set?
No, but it is very good. I'm really happy with this card outside of black decks and very happy with it inside of black decks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what range are we talking here? Let's say you're in black. It's an A, right?
It's an A in black and like an A- outside of black.
Okay.
It doesn't add like a huge amount. Because look, you really don't want to play this for 3 mana. Like this one gives you not only does the 7/5 hit a lot harder with lifelink for 7, also you want that ward to really punish them. You want it to sting.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that like your opponent can find themselves in a position where they just simply cannot target your Phyrexian Fleshgorger. Like, they die if they're at 5 or whatever. Next is Phyrexian Dragon Engine. Here's that one that we mentioned. So this is the 3 mana artifact creature. It's a Phyrexian dragon. And it is rare and it's a 2/2 and it has double strike. And whenever Phyrexian Dragon Engine enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. And as you might imagine, it has Unearth for 3 red. And this is the thing that melds to make the 9/9 just for what it's worth, which isn't much. But who cares? Wow, this thing's insane. 2/2 double strike for 3 with Unearth, and when you unearth it, you can just reload your hand. Sweet.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I would play a 3 mana 2/2 double strike full stop. That's just a good card.
Yeah,
that was like the red white hobgoblin hybrid card, and it was just good. So
yeah.
I'm not complaining about this one.
Yeah, and then the ability to kind of just play out your hand, particularly in an aggressive deck, and have this thing die, which it does have to die, and it does trade up, and then you're just like unearth, draw 3.
Yeah,
love it.
I would say this is a B in decks that cannot unearth it, and closer to an A- in decks that can.
Agreed. I like that for Phyrexian Dragon Engine. It's a real problem. Next is Skitterbeam Battalion. It's 9 mana for a 4/4 artifact creature construct, another mythic. This one has trample and haste, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you get 2 tokens that are copies of it.
So this is one you really want to cast, because getting 3/4/4 trample haste is a lot better than getting 2/2s, because the prototype of 3 red is still pretty good.
And what size is it for the 3 red?
Oh, sorry, 2/2.
Yeah, so you get 3 2/2s for 5, or 3 4/4s for 9, but you get the trample and the haste as well. So the if you cast it is meaning that is just saying like this isn't a good reanimator target, because prototype is casting, right? So it's either
it's just trying to do the reanimator thing, I think.
So this is awesome.
Oh yeah, it's very, very strong.
Yeah, I mean if it's turn 5 and you play this in any type of aggro curve out, like your opponent's in an absolute nightmare scenario. They're just getting slammed on by 3 extra 2/2s in addition to whatever they were planning for before. And if you end up getting a bunch of power stones or whatever, and you can just power this thing out, it's hard to imagine it not mostly winning you the game the turn that you spend the 9 mana. But this one is interesting because you really do kind of need to be in red, right? Like 9 mana, I guess if you're blue-green super ramp, you could just play it, but like 9 is a lot. Even in a power stone set, it's a lot.
Yeah, I would play this card in some of the blue-green ramp decks or red-green ramp decks.
Mm-hmm.
Red-green, of course you play it. But I would play it in some of the ramp decks. I would generally not play it unless you're super ramping or red, but that's not that many decks. Like I guess maybe you're like, blue-green's like the biggest, most likely one, right?
Mm-hmm. What do you want to give it? I mean, I think in red it's B+, probably B+.
I think in red it's B+ level. I think in blue-green ramp it's like a build around like A or something.
Yeah, I mean it's
9
a game
mana win the
ender.
game is pretty good, right?
Right, that's pretty
but
good.
But I think you're mostly going to want to play this in your red decks, yeah.
I'll let you read this next one.
Simian Simulacrum is 3 mana for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, put 2. 3 mana for a 2/1 ape at rare. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, which is a great start. Yeah. And it has unearthed 2 green.
That's fantastic.
Very good.
Wow, that's really good. This is a really great use of unearth as well, leaving behind some value, piling on some extra damage, not too expensive on the unearth, although it is color centric in that it's green, double green, in fact. I like B+ for Simian Simulacrum. I mean, this thing's just an absolute beast, right?
I think it's closer to A- if you're green, because you get to pay 3 mana for 4/3 worth of stats. It can just go onto itself if you need it to.
Crazy.
And then you also get to unearth it for a bunch more stats. And in that case, you're probably not targeting itself, but you're still pretty happy with how it all works out. Outside of green, it's just like, it's like a B+.
Okay. Yeah, really, really good. Next is Perennial Behemoth. It's 5 mana for a 2/7. I like that stat line. It's a beast. This is the colorless one that we mentioned. It's rare. You may play lands from your graveyard, and it has unearth for green. Wow. Somehow they put a combination of stuff together that I'm just not interested in.
Yeah, it's not actually that good for you there. Like it's you end up not getting to use the ability. Like the joke, I guess, is the self-mill thing, but that's not that's not actually that realistic. And unearthing it is obviously not like something you're going to do and really feel like you're getting that much value out of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the idea is you unearth it and then you get to play a land. But I mean, you're attacking with a 2/7, like some later turn down the road. I just don't think I'd want a 2/7. Perennial Behemoth looks like a D or maybe like a build around C if you've got some particular shenanigans.
I would put this in my average black-green deck. I would probably not play it outside of that.
Okay. Rootwire Amalgam is next. It's 5 mana for a 5/5 artifact creature golem. It's mythic rare. And it has an activated ability of 3 green, sacrifice it, create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token where X is 3 times Rootwire Amalgam's power. It gains haste until end of turn, and you can only do this at sorcery speed. And this also has prototype for 1 and a green, and it's a 2/3.
Yeah, this is a very weird card.
Very weird. So it upgrades itself into a 15/15?
Yeah, or you make it for a 2 mana 2/3 that upgrades itself into a 6/6.
At sorcery speed.
At sorcery speed. It's all at sorcery speed.
But it gets haste.
Also that.
I mean, that does actually seem pretty good to play that on turn 2, have a 2/3 that brawls, blocks, keeps your life total up, and then later on you just go, 5 mana, here's my 6/6, slam you.
Yeah, it's a weird card, but it's good at every step in the game, where if you play it at 2, it's good because you needed a 2-drop, and then later you can cash it in. And then obviously making a 15/15 or whatever is kind of sweet. So
how much better is a 15/15 than a 5/5?
3 times better.
It's not 3 times better.
No, it's not. I would say it's about twice as good.
Okay. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, how different is it's like how different is a 30/30 than a 15/15? I would argue in limited, they're not that different.
Right, they're very similar.
If you're not green, it's a 5 mana 5/5, which sometimes you'll play, but not be excited. It's not mythic rare level. So I would say in green, this looks like a A- to me. Just good on 2, good on 5, good in the super late game.
Yeah.
If you're not green, it's like a C.
Yeah, it's like a C. It's a 5 mana 5/5. Next is Clay Champion. This is X and 4 is the mana cost. It's a 2/2. It's an artifact creature construct. It's another myth. Are there a lot of mythics here? It's another mythic. It says Clay Champion enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it for each GG spent to cast it. GG meaning double green mana. When Clay Champion enters the battlefield, choose up to 2 other target creatures you control. For each white spent to cast Clay Champion, put a +1/+1 counter on each of them. Okay, so we have an X in the mana cost, but that doesn't actually scale particularly. It's just a place to dump green, or white mana.
Yeah. So
which you don't have to do.
Yeah. A way to look at this card is it's not a green-white gold card. It's more like a green-white hybrid card.
Yeah.
Where you're getting paid off significantly for either of those colors. So if you play this for 2 green, you say like in your red-green deck, it's a 4 mana 5/5.
Mm-hmm.
Happy with that. If you play it for 2 white, it's a 2/2 that gives 2 other creatures +1/+1. Also pretty happy. Now in white-green though, green, white gets you a 5/5 and 2 other +1/+1 counters, which of course you're all in for. So,
and then you also have that X there where you could go green, white, and get 3
it's a great play
payoffs.
On 8 mana or whatever.
Right.
So I think in green or white, it's like a B+ level card. Mm-hmm. And in specifically green white, it's like an A.
It's an A. You could
or
spend
obviously
4
mono
mana.
green or mono white.
So if you spent green, green, white, white, you're getting a 2/2, 3+1/+1 counters, and 2 additional +1/+1. So you're getting 7 power and toughness on the battlefield for your 4 mana.
4 mana.
Okay. Well, there you go. So just pay attention to which colors you are. What about Blade Coil Serpent?
This is 6X, so it's another similar card. It's a 5/4 mythic rare artifact creature serpent. When it enters the battlefield, for each blue, draw a card. For each black, your opponent discards a card. And for each red, it gets +1/+0, trample, and haste until end of turn.
So this is the Grixis version of that.
Right. The payoffs are a lot less, though. Because instead of 3 +1/+1 counters on it, or 2 +1/+1 counters distributed, you're talking draw a card, discard a card, or +1/+0 and haste. So you're not quite as happy about how all that works out. But I think overall you're still going to play this card if you're any of these colors, and ideally 2 of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually really good if you're 2, right? Like, yeah, I can't come up with a combination where if you get to trigger any 2 of these and get the 5/4, that you're not pretty thrilled.
Yeah. I think that you're pretty happy if you're playing 2 of these colors, and you're, even if at worst case scenario you're playing 3 of each color, so you're not double triggering, you're still going to get a lot of value out of it.
So the question becomes, let's say you're red green, are you playing this? I think you are. Like if you spend double red, you get a
6/4 haste trample. Yeah,
I mean that's pretty good. If you're black green, you just spend double black and they have to pitch a card and you get a 5/4. That's pretty good.
And you also have the outs for quads, right? Where you're paying 4 black and 2 green mana. Yes. And they discard 2 cards.
Yes. And then if you're blue green, it's it's the same thing. Like I'm playing this thing.
I think it's similar to Clay Champion. It's worse than Clay Champion overall. I think Clay Champion is actually a stronger card, but it's similar where if you're one of the colors, it's B level, and if you're 2 of the colors, it's closer to A level.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I'm playing it if I'm touching any of the colors, and any 2, it's a windmill. The Stone Brain is next. It's 2 mana for a legendary artifact. It's rare. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, and exile it. Choose a card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled this way, from their hand this way, I should say, and you can only activate it as sorcery. Well, that's an F.
Yeah, that's an F. It's just like a cranial extraction type card. We don't play those.
If you're relatively new to the game, this card might look appealing to you. Avoid it. These are not good cards to play in limited. Your win percentage will dip significantly for every one of those you add to your deck. Next is Liberator Urza's Battlethopter. This is 3 mana for a 1/2 legendary artifact creature Thopter. A legendary Thopter. It's rare. It has flash and flying, and you may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. Okay. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than the Liberator, greater than Liberator Urza's Battlethopter's power. Mm-hmm. So if it's greater than 1 in most cases, put a +1/+1 counter on this thing so it grows over time. Yeah, there's not much. I mean, that's a lot of text for kind of like not a super interesting card, but it does things. I would play this card.
Oh, this card's great.
Yeah.
3 mana, 1/2 flying that the next spell you cast makes it a 2/3 flying, and the next one makes it a 3/4 flying. And then at some point it starts being harder to trigger as it gets bigger, but you're most likely getting a 3/4 or a 4/5 after a few turns. It's not asking all that much of you. No, plus giving everything flash is also really nice.
Yeah, cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. That is annoying, especially if you build around it a little bit. Your opponent does have to think about combat a little differently. Is it a B?
Yeah, I would give it a B plus probably.
Yeah, B plus, sure. Yeah, it has flying for Liberator. That's its name apparently. The Stasis Coffin is next. It's 3 mana for a legendary artifact at rare. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, and exile it to gain protection from everything until your next turn.
Yeah, that's an F.
That looks like an F to me.
I just don't think you want to be doing that. It's not going to really win you any games you weren't already winning or losing.
Right, and it only delays your loss by a turn. Next is Thran Spider. This is 3 mana for an artifact creature spider. It's a 2/4 with reach. Wow. 3 mana, 2/4 reach. It's rare. And it says when it enters the battlefield, you and target opponent each create a tapped Power Stone token. Oh, one for you, one for me. And you can pay 7 mana to look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it in your hand, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. Nice.
I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, not only do you more likely have good uses for Power Stones than your opponent, you also literally have a use on the card for that Power Stone.
Yeah,
and a
that breaks
2/4
that
reach for
synergy.
3 is a really good defensive creature. So I'm in for Thran Spider. Looks like a B+ to me.
Me too. The only little quibble that you could have with it is that they get to use their Power Stone first, but I don't think it really matters. I like B+ for Thran Spider as well. Next is the Might Stone and Weak Stone. So this is one mentioned earlier, but we can see what it actually does. This is 5 mana for a legendary artifact Power Stone at rare. And when the Might Stone and the Weak Stone enters the battlefield, choose one. You can draw 2 cards, give a creature -5/-5 until end of turn. You can choose one of those. And then it taps to add 2 colorless mana that can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. And then it is also the thing that melds with Urza. Just if that name sounded familiar. So it ETBs, and those are 2 really good choices, right? If you're ahead or at parity, you can draw 2 cards. And if you have something that's just killing you, you can kill it and give it -5/-5.
Yeah. I mean, there's not really any drawback here where the fact that each one is good when the other is not is great. And it's a double Power Stone. So you're pretty happy with that. I would give this probably an A-.
Yeah. I mean, it really is solid. I
mean, think about it in a ramp deck. You play this on turn 5 and you kill their biggest creature, and the next turn you play an 8-drop.
Yeah, that's legit. And if they don't have a biggest creature, you draw 2 cards to draw your 8-drop and then cast it. Sure.
Yeah.
B+ A- for the Might Stone and Weak Stone. I hate the name. Cityscape Leveler is next. It's 8 mana for an 8/8 artifact creature construct at Mythic. It has Trample. And when you cast this spell and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token, and this thing has Unearth for 8.
Yeah, this is what I want as a finisher. It's not not something you can play for cheaper. It doesn't have prototype or anything, but you cast this on 8, kill their best thing. If they don't kill it, you get to attack them, kill their second best thing. And if they do kill it, sometimes you can just unearth it, kill their best thing again.
Yeah, that's ludicrous. This card's amazing. This will probably be one of the cards that we look forward to opening the most in sealed and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is an A-level card because
it is.
I mean, look, if you're red-white aggro and you open this pack 3, sure, you can't play it.
Right.
That's just how it is. But if you open this pick 1, pack 1, I'm almost always going to take it.
Agreed.
And just draft a ramp deck. And if you're already in a ramp or even a mid-range deck, like imagine your black-green mid-range deck. You're just like, okay, I'm going to put a little more emphasis on Power Stones because this is what you want out of your Mythic Rare. Yes,
that is, I agree, especially about that. Even in a mid-range deck, you're playing Cityscape Leveler. So A for Cityscape Leveler, you do have to have considerations for being able to cast 8 mana. Last artifact is Portal to Phyrexia. It is 9 mana. It's a Mythic Rare. It's an artifact. And it says, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types.
I mean, so everything we said about Cityscape Leveler does kind of apply to Portal, where like if you are able to ramp and just actually put this card on the stack, you're probably going to win the game, right? They're going to sack 3 creatures. The difference is 8 and 9 is a world of difference. Like
it is.
It's a lot harder to cast a 9-drop than an 8. It's not more. It's more than 1 turn.
It's almost 2 turns. Yeah, at that point. The interesting thing too is that the leveler, that kills their best thing. This kills their 3 worst things. Now that might be all of their things in some scenarios, and that's obviously better. But if they have a built out board and they have 5 creatures, they sack their 3 worst ones and they still have their 2 best ones. And those 2 creatures could kill you because this thing doesn't trigger to your upkeep. I mean, I think Cityscape Leveler is much, much better card. But that's not really the question here. The question is, would you play a 9 mana card with these abilities? I think so, but this is not just the straight up game ender that the Leveler is.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, it gives you no board presence on its own until your upkeep,
well, no, that's not true. They sack 3 creatures.
I'm saying it gives you no board presence.
Well, that's kind of the equivalent.
I don't think it is. I guess what I'm saying is if they have a 5/5 that's beating the crap out of you, it's their only good creature, and they sack 3 other creatures, they get to keep smashing you. If you play Cityscape Leveler, you kill the 5/5 and have an 8/8. It's almost impossible to die from there.
I just think
I don't want
board presence. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It might not always kill their best thing. There are not very many boards where this won't help.
Yeah. What do you want to give it? I mean, it's 9 freaking mana. Like for my 9 mana, I want a Cityscape Leveler type card that I know almost effectively that I can't lose the game. And I don't know if this is quite that.
I mean, I do think this is you can't lose the game for 9 mana, like close to it.
I don't know, man.
If you have 9 mana out, like they have to have 4 creatures and have their next creature be their last creature be good enough to end the game in 1 turn. Because on your next turn, you get to go get a creature.
That's true. And if you were stable enough to get to the 9 mana, I just kind of view these cards as the type that you sort of barely get to the finish line on, right? It's not like, it's usually an uncomfortable 9 mana where you're like, okay, I made it. I cast my Frost Titan and I get to stabilize. A little bit pessimistic, but it is obviously insanely powerful, right?
My complaint here isn't that this doesn't win the game at 9. I think it does. My complaint is that 9 mana is above what you can normally get to in a game of Magic, even with ramp cards. Like casting 8 mana spells and casting 9 mana spells are very different.
Right. So what do you like here then? I'm having a really hard time with this one.
I would give it a build around B. Like I think in your blue-green or red-green ramp decks that are really going hard on Power Stones, this is a legit thing to build around and sometimes we're really happy. But I think that you're going to lose some number of games with this in your hand that you wouldn't even with an 8-drop.
Okay, build around B for
here's a question just before we move on. How much better would you rather if I tell you right now you have a blue-green ramp deck, would you rather have the Boulder Golem or whatever, the 7 mana 6/5 gain 6 that you can cast for 4 mana, or Portal to Phyrexia, knowing nothing else about it except I've told you you're playing blue-green ramp?
Which card do I get?
You get the Honey Mammoth, the 7 mana 6/5 gain 6 / 4 mana 3/3 gain 3.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I would take that one.
Yeah, I think that might be legit. And that's a pretty big mark against Portal to Phyrexia.
It is.
It's that there's no shortage of ramp
cards. Yeah, I know I'm conservative with these type of cards, but I've just been in too many situations where I finally got my huge mana card down, and then like this one, has the ability to leave a 1-turn window for them to kill you, basically. Yeah. And that makes me nervous when I'm paying 9. Okay, there's a few lands here. This one's called Argoth, Sanctum of Nature. It's a rare. And it says it enters a battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary green creature. It taps for green. And it has the activated ability 2 green, tap it, create a 2/2 green bear creature token, then mill 3 cards, and you can activate it only as a sorcery. And then apparently it melds.
Yeah, I would always play this if I had enough creatures or enough green sources in my deck. Like I'm not splashing this, but it's basically a forest that has upside.
That forest that lets you pump out a bunch of bears?
Yeah, that makes it like a B+.
And the mill 3 is supposed to be an advantage, but actually could get a little uncomfortable if you needed to make a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it so the 3rd bear is maybe a little costly, but I think overall you're still going to be really happy with this. It's just a free spell in your deck. Makes it like a B+.
B+. Fortified Beachhead is a land at Rare. It says, as it enters the battlefield, you may reveal a soldier card from your hand, and Fortified Beachhead enters the battlefield tapped unless you revealed a soldier card this way, or if you control a soldier. It taps for blue or white, and it has activated ability 5. Tap it. Soldiers you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Wow, that is a dream for the soldiers deck. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes your mana better and gives you something to do in the late game. So this is honestly close to like an A- in blue-white soldiers.
It really is. It's a build around. It's a pure build around, but that's insane. Next is Underground River. There's also Brushland, Llanowar Waste, and Battlefield Forge. These are pain lands. So they tap to add a colorless mana, or you can tap them to add, in this case, blue-black, or there's one that's white-green, there's one that's red-white, there's one that's black-green, and they do 1 damage to you. You can add 1 of those chosen colors, and then they ping you for 1. Where do you have pain lands in Limited? I mean, these don't seem to be super jumping off the page to me.
They're probably on par with Evolving Wilds, maybe slightly better, just because if you're playing green-black, you want to have, a land that taps for green and black, makes your mana better. You're going to take them above most C-level commons if you're that color. And if you're splashing a color, it's a little bit better. So C plus on the pain lands.
Next one is Blast Zone. It's a rare land that enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. It taps to add a colorless, and then you can pay XX and tap it to put X charge counters on it. And you can pay 3, tap, and sacrifice Blast Zone to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of charge counters on it. Sweeper land.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little expensive. This card didn't play all that well before. It's going to be a little better here because of Power Stones, but I would kind of view this as if I wanted an 18th land or my mana was good, maybe I'd play it. It's kind of like a weak spell / weak land because colorless is pretty costly. So this is like a D level card.
Yeah, probably a D for Blast Zone. Occasionally it'll pop up. Hall of Tegsin is next. It's a land. It's rare. It taps to add colorless. You can pay 1 mana, tap it to add 1 mana of any color, so it filters 1. And you can pay 4 mana and tap it to create a tapped Power Stone token. You want a colorless land that spits out Power Stones? Yeah,
I kind of like that this also lets you filter. So once you've used it once, it's like a land that taps for any color because the Power Stone can pay for the filtering.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Kind of cute. I'm not like overly impressed by it, but I would play this in any Power Stone deck, basically.
Definitely. Yeah. It looks like a C+ level card to me, can do some things, but 4 is a lot. Last land is Mishra's Foundry. It's a rare. It taps for colorless. You can pay 2 mana to have it become a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn that's still a land. And you can pay 1 and tap it to give target attacking assembly worker +2/+2 until end of turn.
So no more blocking shenanigans with this sort of thing.
Yeah, they finally cut us off, huh?
There are a couple assembly workers in the format, and they're not very good for the most part. There's the 5 mana 4/5 is good. The rest of them are not that great.
Yeah.
So I would play this if you needed colorless, if you didn't mind a colorless land, or you were already going to play like an assembly worker, or you just wanted, if you could play this as your 18th land, you wouldn't feel that bad about it, I guess.
Would you play it in like a red-white aggressive deck?
Yeah, I probably would. Just getting to attack as a 2/2 is kind of nice.
Yeah, it screws up your mana a little bit, but man, getting an extra creature in can be a big game there.
Yeah, probably like a C-level card.
Yeah, it's a C. Okay, so we have another block of cards to go through, but we're going to kind of cruise through these. These are the retro artifacts. They're all reprints, so you probably are familiar with at least some of these cards. And I'm going to read them, but we're going to really kind of focus on these are ones that you want to go for, and these are ones that you want to skip. That's going to be kind of our main goal for this.
Yeah, so part of it, there's 63 more of them.
There's 63 that they're putting in, and then there's 1 per pack, so it's a bit much. But let's get into them. The first one is Adaptive Automaton. It's 3 mana for a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it is that creature type, and then other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Soldier, anybody?
It's a fine card because I would just play this in any deck because you just get to choose whatever creature you've drawn, and you're already getting 3 mana for like 3/3 worth of stats. So
yeah,
that's a B, and it gets a little better if you are a focused deck like Soldiers.
Aetherflux Reservoir is 4 mana for an artifact at Mythic. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn, and you can pay 50 life to have the Reservoir deal 50 damage to any target.
It's an F. It's just you can't play tons of spells in the same turn unless you combo it with Drafna that lets you copy artifact spells on the stack.
Yeah, there you go. Next is Altar of Dementia. This is 2 mana for an artifact at Mythic. It says sack a creature. Target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power.
I see this as a finisher for decks that are just trying to stall out the board and play big things, but often those decks win anyway. So I think it's more of like a C- level card.
Yeah. And the problem is that it doesn't help you stall out the board, and you really need everything you can get to do that. Ashnod's Altar is 3 mana for an artifact. Sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana.
This an F. You're not going to be doing this.
Astral Cornucopia is XXX for an artifact. It enters a battlefield with X charge counters on it. So like if you can pay 3 mana to have it do 1 charge counter. Tap, choose a color, add 1 mana of that color for each charge counter on Astral Cornucopia. So you got a 3 mana, make any color ramp spell, or it can even be more.
That's a D in the set. Like, yes, you can use Power Stones to pay for it, but you still don't want to pay 3 mana for a mana rock.
Right. Or 6 mana for a double mana rock. Black Blade Reforged is 2 mana for a legendary equipment. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control, and it equips for 7, but you can equip to legendary creatures for 3. So the question is, are the Power Stones enough to make you want to play Black Blade Reforged with that steep equip cost?
I think so. If you equip this and give a creature +6/+6 or +7/+7, they are going to have to deal with it. Of course, them removing it is going to be a pretty big setback. But I would give this a C and trending a little upwards if you have a lot of creatures and you need a finisher.
Yeah, if you have a couple legendary creatures, it goes up too. Bonesaw. This is 0 for an equipment. It equips for 1, and the creature gets +1/+0.
I don't think this is playable. This is an F.
If we're trying to play 8 drops, I don't think I want a Bonesaw. Burnished Heart is 3 mana for a 2/2 elk. Yeah, Elmer, it's uncommon. You can pay 3 and sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. That's some business.
I like this at like C+B- in ramp decks. It's expensive, but double ramp is pretty nice. And you get a chump block out of the deal.
Right. Next is Caged Sun. Oh my god, this card. 6 mana for an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add an additional 1 of those mana.
I don't like this card because it's really hard to get value from both ends of it, where you're pumping a bunch of creatures and you care about ramping 10 drops. And oh shoot, 1 second. I actually have to run right now.
Okay.
Sorry, something came up. Resume a little later.
Okay, I'll actually just continue here. If you come back, you do. Otherwise, I'll finish for us.
Okay, I'll try to come back.
Okay. So the next card is Chromatic Lantern. It's 3 mana for... Oh, and Cage Sun, by the way, Luis was going to say that it's hard to get both ends of the spectrum. And if you're going to pay 6 mana, you don't want to pay 6 mana for either single ability. If you were able to leverage both consistently, then you would definitely want to. But if you can't, then not. So it doesn't get a high grade. Next is Chromatic Lantern. It's 3 mana for an artifact. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it taps for 1 mana of any color. Same thing with the Mana Rock. This isn't a multicolored set, so you're not really getting much out of that. Chromatic Star is 1 mana for an artifact. You can pay 1 tap and sack it to add 1 mana of any color. And when it is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. Again, this isn't a multicolored set, so there's really no benefit to this. There's not really a downside to it either. If an artifact entering the battlefield or dying or being in the yard matters, then you could play it, but it's never going to be like, oh, I got a Chromatic Star, we're doing it. Next is Cloud Key. This is 3 mana for an artifact. It's rare. As Cloud Key enters the battlefield, choose artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. Now, I don't think you're ever really going to be playing this. It's just too big of a cost to pay 3 mana plus a card just to make stuff cheaper unless you're doing something degenerate, which is really hard. Defense Grid is 2 mana for an artifact at rare. Each spell costs 3 more to cast, except during its controller's turn. You pretty obviously can't be the one to have to spend the mana and a card on this that is an equal effect and in some cases doesn't even do anything. So that's an F. Door to Nothingness. This is sweet. It's 5 mana for an artifact. The ETB is tapped, and you can pay white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, tap it and sacrifice it to have target player lose the game. But I just don't see how you could ever put together that type of mana in the set, so it's going to be an F as well. I mean, I guess there's 2 card combos that you could maybe assemble, Chromatic Lantern, Door to Nothingness, but there's only one of these per pack. You're not really going to be doing that. Elsewhere Flask is 2 mana for an artifact. It's uncommon. When Elsewhere Flask enters the battlefield, draw a card, and you can sacrifice Elsewhere Flask to choose a basic land type. Each land you control becomes that type until end of turn. Again, this doesn't really do anything, but it is a 2 mana artifact cantrip, and it goes into the graveyard. So if you have anything that cares about that stuff, you can put it into your deck, but it's never going to be a priority. Foundry Inspector is 3 mana for a 3/2. And it says artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now that's some business there. There's a lot of artifacts in this set, and some of them are very expensive, like the prototypes and stuff. So a Foundry Inspector is going to be nice, and it's a decent card. It's a 3 mana 3/2, so that's pretty good. Gilded Lotus is next. That's 5 mana artifact that taps to add 3 mana of any one color. You can, when you tap it, you get to choose what color you want. I mean, if you're playing the 8 mana cards deck, if you're playing a bunch of artifact stuff or whatever that can pump this thing out. It actually does things. It actually is really powerful. You just need to make sure that you have either very expensive stuff and or repeatable mana sinks to make it worth it. But if you do, it actually is. Goblin Charbelcher's in this. Wow. 4 mana for an artifact at rare. You can pay 3, tap it. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. And then the Charbelcher deals damage equal to the number of non-land cards revealed this way to any target. If the revealed card was a mountain, Goblin Charbelcher deals double that damage. Instead, put the revealed cards onto the bottom of your library in any order. Honestly, not sure if this is something that you should be doing in limited. Let's say you're in red and you pay your 4 mana, nothing happens, you say go. Then on your turn, you're like, okay, activate this thing. Play 3 mana, tap it, and reveal. And even if it's only 2, you could do 2 damage to something that actually could kill something, or you can start doming your opponent. And, even if you only hit 2, if you hit a mountain, which is going to be about half your lands, now you're doing 4 to something. I think I'd actually play it. I mean, it just seems like repeatable. If you get any breathing room with this, or if you get lucky and just get a big hit, it's going to absolutely dominate. And you can also pay for the power stones, to cast and activate it. So I think I would just play Goblin Charbelcher, though I've never actually done so in limited. Who knows? Helm of the Host is next. It's 4 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. It is mythic rare. I'm going to put this up front. The equip cost is 5. Okay, so you're thinking, all right, 4 mana plus 5 equip, this thing better be good. It is. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of the equipped creature. Except the token isn't legendary if the equipped creature is legendary and the token gains haste. It is an absolute game ender, and in a set where you have a bunch of mana that you can pay for artifacts and activated abilities cheaper, Helm of the Host is going to be really good. It was printed in original Dominaria where it was an outright bomb, but that was a slow, grindy format. I don't know what this format looks like yet, but given the mana advantages that we have, I am playing Helm of the Host until somebody proves me otherwise, and I would definitely take it early and play it often. Next one is Howling Mine, which is 2 mana for an artifact at the beginning of each player's draw step. That player, if Howling Mine is untapped, that player draws an additional card. I think the only time when I'd want to play this is if I had some way to tap it so that my opponent didn't get the card. Otherwise, you're down a card and they get the card first, and that usually doesn't end well for you. So I would just keep that in mind. But if you have a combo with it, it might be sweet. Ichor Wellspring is 2 mana for an artifact. It's uncommon. When it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. Same thing. If you have a deck that cares about artifacts ETBing or dying, or if you can sacrifice them or anything, then you definitely want an Ichor Wellspring. And if not, then it's not going to make the cut, even though, it's a cantrip. Inspiring Statuary is next. It's 3 mana for an artifact at rare. And it says non-artifact spells you cast have improvise. Your artifacts can help cast these spells. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1. So the problem I see with Statuary here is that the natural space that you would look are like token artifacts that you can create multiples of that can now help you cast spells. Well, we have those. They're called Power Stones, and they do the exact same thing. So I'm assuming that Statuary is just going to be an F, and you won't want to play it, although it could be fun. Ivory Tower is 1 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life, where X is the number of cards in your hand minus 4. So if you have 5, 6, or 7 cards, or 8, you can gain some life. I can't imagine that this is going to be worth it. Once you cast some of your spells, it doesn't do anything. Jalum Tome is 3 mana for an artifact at uncommon, and then you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and draw a card, and then discard a card. So that's not really going to be worth it, even with the freer activated abilities flying around. Not that it's terrible, but you are down a card in the exchange overall, and that's kind of unacceptable. Next is Journeyer's Kite. It is 2 mana for an artifact at rare. It says it has 3 tap. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. I am tempted by the Journeyer's Kite. I've never actually seen this card before. It is kind of interesting because there are very expensive things to do. I'd be more interested if this was a multicolored set where I could fix my mana with it. That's probably not going to happen very often here. You're 5 mana to get a basic, but you can theoretically clear out all of the basics from your library at some point. I don't know. I think I would run this. I think in a mid-range or control deck, I'd probably try to play it and see what I could do, especially if I was ramping or had a bunch of expensive spells. This doesn't ramp you, but there is a point in the game where not missing land drops is similar to ramp because you're sort of expected to at some point. Kind of interesting. It's probably too slow though. Keening Stone, 6 mana for an artifact at rare. You can pay 5 mana and tap it to have target player mill X cards, where X is the number of cards in that player's graveyard. This actually is a legitimate win condition in grindy matchups. If they have like 4 cards in their yard, you activate Keening Stone, they mill 4. Now they've got 8. The next time you mill, it's 8. And then, the game's over in a couple of turns. It gives you inevitability. The problem is that it's extremely expensive and doesn't affect the board. 6 mana plus 5 to activate. Yes, it is pure inevitability, but you better be ramping and this better be your win con because otherwise it is too expensive and doesn't affect the board. But I could see actually running this occasionally as the win condition in a ramp/control deck. It does do that. Key to the City is next. It's 2 mana for an artifact. It is rare. It says tap, discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. And then whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. I actually like Key to the City in this set. The only kind of the only thing that's annoying about this card is that you have to pay the 2 on your upkeep and to get the card. And then you're like, well, now I don't have as much mana to actually cast my spells. And you can kind of start to fall behind that way. But if you've got a Power Stone or 2 out and that 2 becomes free-ish, then it's a lot better. And, you're already getting in for damage. It also can just outright win the game on its own. If you have a big creature and your opponent isn't mounting an offense against you, it really forces the issue. So I actually like Key to the City for the set. It's probably like a C plus B minus type card. Liquimetal Coating is 2 mana for an artifact. You can tap it to have target permanent become an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. Not going to be playing that. Lodestone Golem is 4 mana for a 5/3, and it also says non-artifact spells cost 1 more to cast. It is a 5/3 for 4, which is decent. And if you're heavy artifacts, you might want to play it. I don't think it's going to be an important card, but it probably will see a little bit of play. It affects your stuff too, though, so it can be really annoying. Mazemind Tome, 2 mana for an artifact. Tap it to put a page counter on Mazemind Tome and scry 1. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, and put a page counter on Mazemind Tome to draw a card. And then if there are 4 or more page counters on Mazemind Tome, you exile it. And if you do, you gain 4 life. I love this card in this set. 2 mana. Yes, if you need to, you can scry, but usually you just want to use it as a draw 3 or a draw 4 and then gain 4 life. That's a big swing. Like that, when you're spending your mana drawing cards, you're usually getting pounded for it. And this helps you mitigate that. And then as I've said numerous times, having additional access to Power Stone mana to power this thing out and to activate it is really good. I think Mazemind Tome would be actually a high pick. Mesmeric Orb is next. It's 2 mana for an artifact at Mythic. And it says, whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. I wouldn't play this. Millstone is 2 mana. Artifact. This is one of my favorite cards back in the day. And you can pay 2 mana and tap it to have target player mill 2 cards. Kind of interesting, actually. It's similar to Keening Stone. It just works a lot more slowly. But when you combine the fact that they're drawing a card a turn and you're milling them for 2, it actually is a win condition in those type of decks. I actually would expect to see a little bit of play in a control deck that just wants a win condition that's hard to deal with, but not a particularly high pick either. Mind's Eye is 5 mana for an artifact. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. I've never played with this card in like a competitive format before, but I would. If you just get to start drawing 2 cards a turn using your extra mana, I think you're good to go. So yeah, that seems really powerful. Mishra's Bauble is 0 for an artifact, and you can tap and sack it to look at the top card of target player's library. You draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Same thing I said before. If you care about artifacts entering the battlefield or dying, then you would play it. Otherwise you wouldn't, or you wouldn't prioritize it at least. Mox Amber is 0 for a legendary artifact at Mythic. It taps to add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. There are some legendary creatures, but I don't think you can build around Mox Amber enough to have it actually be a thing. So I would say Mox Amber is going to be an F or a pass here. Mystic Forge is 4 mana for an artifact. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast artifact spells and colorless spells from the top of your library, and you can tap it and pay 1 life to exile the top card of your library. This is going to get a build around like B+ or something. If you can build an artifact-centric deck, of which I don't know if you can go as hard as you need to in this set, but if you can, this card's fantastic. I mean, you can look at the top card and play an artifact spell. If you play it, then the next card is there and you can play another artifact spell. So it can really do some stuff. But my guess is that it's too hard to build around and it'll end up just being a build around that never gets used. Ornithopter is here. It's 0 for a 0/2 flyer. I don't think you'll be playing it. Perilous Vault is 4 mana for an artifact. You can pay 5 mana, tap it, and exile it to exile all non-land permanents. Similar to the stuff we said about the kind of new Perilous Vault in the set. I mean, it's a 9 mana Wrath. It does get the job done. I think you'll probably play it a decent amount of the time, but it can be difficult to kind of spring a trap on your opponent, given that you need 9 mana all at once to make it so that they can't tell. If you pay the 4 mana and say go, they can usually take some type of action to mitigate it. And yeah, there we go. Hold on, I want to... No worries. And by the way, that was just a little, not like an emergency, but that was, Luis's kid's thing. So that's why he had to run away. Phyrexian Processor is 4 mana for an artifact. And it says, as it enters the battlefield, pay any amount of life. And then it has the ability to pay 4 and tap it to create an XX black Phyrexian minion creature token. And where X is the life paid as Phyrexian Processor into the battlefield. So if you cast this and you say like pay 10 life, you can pay 4 to make a 10/10 and you can do that every turn. I think this card is workable. I mean, even if it's only 3/3 or 4/4, if you start pumping out one of those per turn, it adds up really fast, particularly if you can do it straight away. If you have 8 mana available, which Power Stones will help you do. So I think Phyrexian Processor is actually quite strong. And I would expect it to see a lot of play. How many more do I have to go here? Not that many. Phyrexian Revoker is 2 mana for a 2/1. And as ETBs, you can choose a non-land card name, and activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated. Yeah, I would play this. It does have to be a card. I don't think that tokens count for that. So I don't know. I don't think you can name, what's it called? Power Stones, but this is where Luis would tell me if that's true or not. At any rate, you're probably going to have something worth picking, and it is a 2/1 for 2. So why not? Platinum Angel, 7 mana, 4/4 flyer. And you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. I would play it. I mean, it's easier to cast in this set, and it is a must kill of kind of, it defines the must kill word. If they don't kill it, you can go to 0 life. You can mill yourself. You can't lose the game. And oftentimes it is the best attacker as a 4/4 flyer. So yeah, I'd play it. Precursor Golem, definitely would play it too. It's a 5 mana 3/3. And when it ETBs, you create 2 other 3/3 colorless artifact golems. So you get 9 power and 9 toughness over 3 creatures for 5 mana. But whenever a player that casts an instant or sorcery that targets only a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem spell that it could target. And it targets a different one. So like if they lightning bolt one of your golems, all your golems get lightning bolted, but also it works for you too. If you pump them, like you use giant growth on it, then they all get it. So you're definitely playing Precursor Golem, even though sometimes they do just kill it. Pristine Talisman is 3 mana, taps to add 1 colorless mana, and you gain a life. I actually probably would play that. The gain a life is underrated. You get to do that every turn, no matter what. And then, ramping is relevant here. I don't think I would, I think it's borderline, but I'd probably play it. Psychosis Crawler is 5 mana. For an artifact creature, Phyrexian Horror. It is a star, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. And whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. Sure, I would play it. I mean, it ends up being like a 3/3 or a 4/4. A lot of times it's like annoying for your opponent, but not devastating. But I'd play it. Quicksilver Amulet is 4 mana for an artifact, and it's 4, tap it. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. These are almost never worth it, and I would assume that it's an F. Quietus Spike is 3 mana for an artifact equipment. It equips for 3. The equipped creature has Death Touch, and whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. Generally, this is okay. The Death Touch makes it so that they don't want to take hits from it, but at the same time, the whole half their life thing kind of doesn't work out as well as you think it would. I would assume that Quietus Spike sees a little bit of play, but isn't a bomb. Ramos Dragon Engine is 6 mana for a 4/4 flying legendary artifact creature dragon. Whenever you cast a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each of that spell's colors, and you can remove 5 +1/+1 counters from it to add double Wooburg, and you can only do that once each turn. Well, there's your combo with the Door to Nothingness, I guess. 6 mana 4/4 flyer. Whenever you cast a spell, it gets bigger. Yeah, I'm going to play that all day. Runechanter's Pike. Oh, this thing just gives me bad memories. 2 mana for an artifact equipment that equips for 2. Equipped creature has first strike and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Clearly a build around, but it actually is a good payoff for like a blue-red spell stack if you have it, although that doesn't seem to be a focal point in this particular set. Scrap Trawler, Scrappy T, is 3 mana for a 3/2 artifact creature construct at rare, and whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact in your graveyard with lesser mana value. So you can get back a 2/1 or a 0 mana artifact. If you have those, you definitely play Scrap Trawler. I mean, it's just good value. Sculpting Steel is 3 mana for an artifact. You may have Sculpting Steel enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. So it's a clone, but only for artifacts. I don't know enough to know if that would be something that I'd be interested in. I could easily say yes, and I could also see no. So that's a wait and see. I mean, if you're only copying like a Power Stone, it's not good enough. But if you're copying almost any creature, it is. So there you go. Self-Assembler, 5 mana for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an assembly worker creature card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, and then shuffle. This one's fairly obvious. It is an assembly worker, so it was meant to play off of itself, but now that it's in this sort of weird retro slot, that's very unlikely to happen. So you just need to know if you have other assembly workers worth searching up, and if you do, then it is actually playable. Semblance Anvil is 3 mana for an artifact with imprint. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a non-land card from your hand. Spells you cast that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less to cast. That is an F. Sigil of Valor is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other creature you control, and its equip cost is 1. This actually is a good card for the low to the ground creature / token decks, but every other place it's bad. Soul Guide Lantern is 1 mana for an artifact at uncommon. When Soul Guide Lantern enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. You can tap and sacrifice Soul Guide Lantern to have each opponent to exile each opponent's graveyard, and you can pay 1, tap and sack it to draw a card. Yeah, I think I actually would play Soul Guide Lantern. There's enough unearth and nonsense in the set that a card that replaces itself and also nabs one of their cards is probably worth it in the set. Springleaf Drum is 1 mana for an artifact. It taps. You can tap it and tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. Nope, not playing it here. Staff of Domination. Oh my God. 3 mana for an artifact. It has 5 activated abilities. You can pay 1 mana to untap it. You can pay 2 mana and tap it to gain a life. You can pay 3 mana and tap it to untap a creature. You can pay 4 mana and tap it to tap target creature. And you can pay 5 mana and tap it to draw a card. It's probably slow by modern standards, but I do not care. I am 100% playing Staff of Domination. You can do stupid stuff when you get to a ton of mana. You have it on the battlefield, you say go, if you've got 6 mana, you can be like 3 mana, untap my blocker, or you can be like 4 mana, tap your creature, pay 1 mana, untap it. If you have an extra mana, pay 2 mana, tap it, gain a life. You need to get up into the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 mana range to make this thing go, but it actually does do things, though, again, it is a little clunky. Sundering Titan. Wow, Sundy T is here. This is an 8 mana 7/10 that when it enters or leaves the battlefield, you choose a land of each basic land type and destroy those lands. Yeah, screw it. I'm in. I'm playing Sundering Titan. That card's sweet. Swiftfoot Boots is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and equip cost is 1. I'm actually down on this card. There are some decks that would like to play it, and it can be very powerful, but it doesn't actually affect combat. What I should say is it doesn't affect power and toughness, which is really what I want out of my equipment. Giving my creature haste does change the complexion of the board, but it's usually on the battlefield and your opponent can kind of play around it. I wouldn't highly prioritize Swiftfoot Boots myself, but I could see it being okay in a few decks. Sword of the Meek. This is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. The equip cost is 2, and the creature that's equipped gets +1/+2. It says, whenever a 1/1 creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to the battlefield, then attach it to that creature. I don't think I'd play Sword of the Meek. The combo part's not relevant. And 2 mana, 2 to equip for +1/+2 isn't worth it, so I'm out. Thorn of Amethyst is 2 mana artifact. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. That's an F. Unwinding Clock is 4 mana for an artifact. Untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. That is likely also an F. That is fun in multiplayer when you can have a bunch of mana producing artifacts like Power Stones, tap them for an activated ability, say go, untap them, activate that ability again. The other opponent says go, you do it again. But if it's just you and your opponent, I don't think this is going to be worth a card. Well of Lost Dreams is 4 mana for an artifact. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do, you draw X cards. That's clearly a build around that doesn't seem to have a home in the set, and they did save the best for last. It's frickin' Wormcoil Engine. 6 mana for a 6/6 Death Touch lifelink, and when it dies, you get a 3/3 lifelinker and a 3/3 Death Touch. This is one of the best limited cards of all time. It's probably in the top 10, and I would expect it to be probably just the best card in the set. It maybe it's top 5 or something, but I mean, it is a front runner to be literally the best card in this entire set. Okay. That's going to do it for the Rare and Mythic Rare review. Again, apologies that Luis had to step away, but he had a situation to handle with one of his children. And that happens sometimes. That is the nature of it. But hopefully you learn something and you feel a little more prepared for the next events that you're going to play, knowing which bombs to go for and which ones to avoid. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV pretty much everywhere. And if you want to find out more about the show, everything's over at lrcast.com. That's every episode of the show we've ever done is there, as well as links to like our streams and stuff like that. You can find it again at lrcast.com. Thanks again to TCG Player/Channel Fireball for their support of the show. We really do appreciate it. And with that, we will say goodbye. We'll see you next time. Okay, Jeff, you want to come in here? I'm going to bring in producer.
Boy, do I.
I'm going to bring in producer Jeff for our sign off. Jeff.
Let me just make sure I'm on air.
Yeah, I hear you in my headset, so that's the good news. So first off, Jeff, welcome to LR. You've been on the show for a really long time now, but not on the show. It's close
to 2 years now I've been on the show.
It's forever. So
yeah.
Okay, so this is, and I'm putting you on the spot for a sign off.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best food in Ireland, which is where you live?
I know the answer you want me to give.
No, I want you to give the answer that if any of our listeners happen to pop in to Ireland, maybe they visit Dublin where you're at, and they're like, you know what, I'm really hungry, I want something great. Tell them the thing to get.
Okay, I'm gonna give 2 actual answers here. I'm gonna give the real answer, and then I'm going to give the answer you want to give, because like you lined it up. You got it. So the first thing is, I would say like a lot of like pubs and bars and things here will serve as restaurants during the day, and when they're doing that, they'll have like a thing called carvery, which is basically it's exactly what it sounds like. You'll walk up and they will like carve a cut of meat that you want. So it'll be like usually like roast beef or roast chicken or something like that. And it's like a very traditional kind of like country person's kind of like lunch or dinner or whatever, and it is always great. It's just like really, really good, really prime cut of like beef or chicken or something like that.
Okay.
And then a whole bunch of like just like vegetables and gravy and all that kind of thing. It's great. It's one of the greatest pleasures that there is in this country.
Okay. And so do you need to look like it? Would that just be on the menu? Like, hey, I'd like the carvery, or is it like a special day?
It's a place where you would like go up to a counter and like
with
like a tray or whatever. And
particularly.
But it is still like a triple plus food.
Okay. Gotcha. And then give us the real answer.
Like, if the vibe was a little bit different and you were like just at home or like in your hotel or whatever, and you were like, oh, I don't want to go out anywhere. We have a lot of like Chinese restaurants here, but it's like it's not food anyone in China has ever eaten. It's just like
we do that
like
here,
hole in the wall, like Taco Bell equivalent, basically. And they do a thing in places like that called a spice bag, which is I think one of the best junk foods that exists. Full stop. And so what that is a bunch of like deep fried shredded chicken, covered in like breadcrumbs or whatever, so it's crispy. A bunch of fries, and then like Chinese 5-spice and basically like sugar thrown on top of it. And there's like some vegetables or whatever, but that's in there just for like color. And it is delicious. And it's usually served with like a curry gravy, and we'd call it a curry sauce here, but it's much closer to like a curry gravy than it is any actual traditional legitimate curry. But it is utterly delicious.
Spice bag. You heard it here first.
Highly recommend if anyone is in Ireland at any point to like just go on to the equivalent of Uber Eats here and order a spice bag from a Chinese restaurant.
Thanks, Jeff.